of support with an emphasis on reading using one of the NCL's, National Center on Improving Literacy's brand new tools, which is called the MTSS-R Checklist, and among other ways to help with Fidelity that we'll be reviewing this afternoon. If you're joining, Lena will be taking you on a deeper dive into Tier 3 problem solving. And so we know that some of you will be joining just for the morning, some of you will be joining just for the afternoon, and some of you will be with us for the whole day. What we do want to note is that both sessions will be recorded, and we will be posting them probably within the next day or two on Pat and YouTube. So if you have colleagues that weren't able to make it today, please encourage them to view whatever it is they wanted to see that they might have missed on Pat and YouTube, and expect that again probably by tomorrow. So without further ado, I just want to preface Dr. Santura's introduction by saying that she's been a partner, a university partner, and really a practitioner partner to the patent team, specifically the MTSS initiative and the literacy initiative, for many, many years. I want to say like we're going on 10 or more now, if not longer.
Yeah.
And one of her most recent endeavors has been to be a leading contributor among a broader group of people to the establishment and the recent renewal of funding for the National Center on Improving Literacy. And she's going to talk to you extensively about this, but I want to really put a plug in for letting you know that this is the first center of its kind, in the sense that it takes everything we've learned about the science of reading and puts it into a user-friendly repository. And we say user-friendly, what we're talking about is not just the research, the empirical reading research, but how do you make that accessible to families, to teachers, to service providers in the advanced tiers, and to administrators, among all other stakeholders. And so this is really a one-stop shop in terms of bridging research to practice literally overnight if you choose to do so. So we feel that this is a critical tool, and we have a lot of resources at the IU and the patent level around literacy. But this center, I think, just takes it to a whole nother level. And so if we work in tandem, I think we're really in a nice position to provide you as stakeholders with next steps to continue to do your jobs really well. So I just wanted to say that and let you know, hold on to the links that you'll be receiving today. Hold on to all the tools that you'll be receiving today, and really make time, if you can, to meet with your larger teams to do a more intensive walkthrough of what's available through this center and everything that Lena is going to cover today. So let me please reintroduce her. And again, the session will be recorded. Dr. Santura is a research professor with the Wheelock College of Education and Human Development at Boston University. She currently serves as a co-principal investigator of the National Lead for Literacy Center and lead of the Instruction and Intervention strand for the National Center on Improving Literacy. With both centers, she works on projects related to professional learning, technical assistance, and instructional intervention for students with literacy-related disabilities. Dr. Santura is also serving as co-PI on a project focused on the development and pilot testing of a Tier 3 literacy intervention, which we're extremely excited about, and which is part of an IES research study focused on classroom discourse, vocabulary, and comprehension of students at risk of reading and writing failure. She has also taught pre- and in-service teachers and leaders at the undergraduate and graduate level, presented extensively on how to apply evidence-based instructional strategies in the classroom, and consulted with state, local, and private agencies, including her work with Patent, to develop content related to MTSS implementation in the areas of writing and intensive intervention for students with dyslexia and language-based challenges in reading. So we're pleased to turn it over to Lena Santura, and thank you again for your time and effort today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. It is wonderful to be with you all. Good morning. I'm excited to talk with you more about systems level implementation, specifically the use of multi-tiered systems of support to support reading. And what I'm going to do is take this systems approach and discuss components, basically the ingredients, if you will, about what makes a high quality multi-tiered system of support system that you can implement and sustain over time with Fidelity. So I'm really taking a high level view of those ingredients and how they work together to support systems implementation. We've done extensive work at the National Center on Improving Literacy on multi-tier systems of support and looking at a systems level perspective to support all students in terms of reading achievement and literacy outcomes. As I get started, one of the things I wanted to share is that through the pandemic, one of the things we observed through our work with ENSEL was that schools and districts that had a high quality MTSSR system in place were able to pivot more successfully to, say, virtual or remote learning compared to other districts or schools. So we actually specifically saw that with a couple of schools in Pennsylvania that we work with. They had amazing, tight systems of support in place. And they were able to, because they had a system to provide support to students, were really able to leverage that and pivot and make that pivot. So it was a lesson learned for us as we continue to look at multi-tiered systems of support in reading. So let me get going and tell you about your materials and handouts, how we'll handle the agenda this morning and break up our content. So with materials, there's three main things I want you to have access to. The first two, I believe, are provided through Patton with a link. They probably have posted those in their live binder for you to get access to. The first is the PowerPoint. So you can follow along with the content that I'm sharing right now. So it's just a replica of what I'm using to present. The second is a resource packet. The resource packet is a Word document and contains some of the resources and tools I'll be sharing today. So basically those resources and tools are compiled in one packet. The third, and this is a critical document I want you to be able to access, is something called the MTSSR Implementation Checklist. Below, you'll see a Google Drive access to this. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It's a tool that we developed through the National Center on Improving Literacy, or we call ourselves ENSEL. So our ENSEL tool is accessed through that Google Drive, and it is an Excel spreadsheet. Once you get access to it, you can download it and have a copy that way. So I want to make sure that you're able to do that access that third document. That'll be a critical tool when we think about Fidelity and sustaining a multi-tiered system of support. So I know my Patton colleagues will continue to share that link as we move forward. We'll be talking about that a little later this morning, and I'll pause to make sure you all are getting access to it and you can find your way to the link. We want to make sure you can download and get a copy of it. So there you go. Those three areas of materials to share. So we're in Zoom today. Just check to make sure you're on mute. I think you probably are currently have mute as a setting. You're welcome to show your video or not according to your preference. I think when I switch over from presenting to come talk to you, if you're able to put your video on, that'll be great. So I could see some of you as participants. But as I'm presenting, you certainly don't have to have your video on. The chat box is something we're definitely going to leverage today. I want to really have a dialogue with you, and through Zoom and our virtual platform, that's a great way to be able to do it. So please be ready to share your ideas and questions you may have in the chat. And my Patton colleagues will be monitoring the chat box. And if questions come up, they're gonna take note of those, and I will pause at break points to check in to see if there are any questions about what we're discussing. So you're welcome to pose those questions, and when Pat and colleagues will relay them to me, and we'll have a conversation that way. Another thing I want to be able to do right off the bat this morning is to find out who you are and what your work is within the context of multi-tiered systems of support. And to do so, I'm going to use or attempt to use the annotate stamp feature. And so with annotate, what you do is basically hover your cursor, at least for my setup here. If I hover my cursor at the top of the screen, I'll get a bar, drop down menu bar, and you'll see annotate. I select annotate, so click on annotate, and then you'll have a second toolbar appear. And what I want you to be able to do is select stamp. Selecting stamp will allow you to then stamp on my screen and to indicate a response on the screen itself. So through that process, I will begin to find out who you are. And if that doesn't work, if you can't get your annotate function to work, please just respond in chat. So I do want to know who's here today. I want to know who's interested in a multi-tiered systems of support for reading, and you are welcome to use that annotate stamp feature. If you see your role posted here, please go ahead and select that. And if not, you can just flood the chat with your responses, and I'll stop my slides and come over and check in with you. But you're welcome to try that. So finding that annotate feature, selecting the stamp. And so, for example, if I'm a reading specialist, I would indicate it there. So I'm gonna, because most of you are corresponding in chat, I'm gonna stop my share here and come over and see that chat. Yeah, some of you are having trouble accessing annotate, totally no worries. So school psychologist, intervention coordinator, perfect. Instructional coaches, wonderful. And I'm gonna go back, we have an MTSS coordinator, which is fabulous. Consultants with us, reading specialists. Great. Yeah, keep it coming. Thank you so much. Excellent. Perfect. Principals are here today, which makes me very happy. Intervention specialists, you all are, yeah, the right target audience to think about systems implementation. School counselors are represented. Thanks, everybody. This is great. Thank you for sharing who you are.
And if for some reason we're not able to annotate, I'm working on that.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. We can definitely respond with chat, Donna. I will leverage the chat today. Wonderful, everybody. Thank you. Well, welcome. And this is the perfect audience as I bring you into my agenda for the day here and tell you how we'll organize our time. Let me clear drawings and move forward. So what I'd like to do is answer the following clusters of questions. I know you all are immersed in multi-tiered systems of support, but I want to pull you back to that big picture and have you think about what are those ingredients that really make a system successful in terms of implementation. I then want to take a deeper dive on the MTSSR leadership team and how it's used to support multi-tiered systems of support. We know that teaming and good teaming structures in place lead to sustainability because then the infrastructure is built through that teaming perspective. So I want to take a look at what the MTSSR leadership team is and how that's used within the context of MTSSR. You may call the leadership team something different, which is totally okay. I'll talk about its role and function, and you may equate it to something you're already doing or something that you might have in place, but you just call it something, you just label it differently. Then the next set of content, I want to take a look at the leadership team and how leadership presence is a key variable in supporting implementation. Next, we'll look at the data piece. So the use of student and implementation data as critical components of what we do within the context of MTSSR. And I want you to look at number 3 and think it's not just student data, but it's also the implementation data. The and there is very important. And then finally, we're going to conclude, bring you back full circle to this leadership team and how what you do supports professional learning. And then I'll review the resources that we looked at together through our morning, and just get them in your head so you know what you're taking away from that session. In terms of our time, we're going to spend the bulk of our first component of the presentation on number 1. So I'm expecting as we work through that content, that might take us to our break. And I'll start that break somewhere between 10 and 10:15. Yeah, with that break, I'll also look for a natural stopping point for us in terms of pacing. When we return from break, number 2 and 3 are connected to me from a content perspective. So that'll be our after break content. And number 4 is essentially our conclusion. So that's how we'll divide up our time. Number 1, before break, 2 and 3 kind of connected together after break, and then 4 covering those questions is our conclusion. So let's set some groundwork and just have that basic understanding of what those important elements of a multi-tiered support of reading is. And to do that, I want just to do a review. This will set us up to take that deeper dive into the ingredients of what makes a successful MTSSR system successful. So multi-tiered systems of support in reading, as you all know, it's comprehensive and integrated. And because it's so comprehensive, implementation requires distributed leadership and teaming, which would be a theme today as I talk about sustainability and implementation. Our whole purpose of setting up this system is to focus on the instruction and intervention that's required to ensure that all students meet their reading objectives. So that's why we do it. It's a system of efficiency if we do it well. It's comprehensive, right? Number 1, in that all students are supported to meet reading objectives. It's integrated. So we're looking at how to connect our system so that students don't fall through the cracks. And then finally, we're looking at how to help students who struggle meet and receive instruction in group, individualized, and in differentiated ways to meet reading goals. So we're looking at all 3 components in a system. You've seen this lots of times, but I just want to reiterate how multi-tiered supports work. For students, we want to focus our efforts on really building a strong core of support. That's your core curriculum in reading, so that it addresses most of your students and their reading needs. By doing that, that allows you then to focus on the intervention tiers, which are tiers 2 and 3 in this visual, so that you can be more intensive in the level of support for your students. One of the things I want to be clear about as we think about multi-tiered systems of support is that it's the label, what we do is in the title, multi-tiered. So some systems, and your system might be designed around 3 tiers of support as reflected here on the graphic. So you have core instruction at your tier 1 level that's universal and provides a good core base for reading for most of your students and their needs. That you might have a tier 2, and that tier 2 is targeting intervention. That intervention at tier 2 is intended to enhance that core through pre-teaching, review, for example, and it's often very tightly aligned with your tier 1. And then a tier 3 is more intensive intervention. So these are some students, a handful, your 3 to 5% optimally, that require skill groups, right, in areas of need so that they're successful in core instruction. For all in the system, we're monitoring, right, student performance at different levels of intensity to ensure progress towards goals. So once we're really working with students at that intensive level of prevention, we are deeply looking at student performance and what their response to intervention looks like. So as I said, multi-tiered, we recognize now that other systems, particularly maybe at the secondary level, might be designed around 2 tiers of support. So you have your universal core and your second tier is intervention more specifically. And then you have special education in addition to that model. So multi-tiered systems of support is what it is, multi-tiered, right? We're looking at these different levels of support for students. Including students with disabilities. I have this really short video from the National Center on Improving Literacy. I think it gives a nice little overview of multi-tiered systems of support. So as we get started with our session this morning, I want to review these basics because this will let us look at what are the essential ingredients in this very comprehensive and complex system? What are the essential ingredients that we have to look at from a systems level perspective to really ensure high quality implementation? So we'll watch this little bit of a video here just to get some of those basics down. This video is about 5 minutes. So let me cue that up for you. I'm going to jump over to a different file here and make sure that you can see this video. Here we go.
Teaching students to read successfully is one of the most important and challenging responsibilities of schools. Students who have difficulty reading not only are missing an important and enjoyable life skill, but they are far more likely than good readers to have difficulty with other school subjects, to drop out of school early, and to experience diminished education and employment opportunities throughout their lives. Reading problems remain the single greatest challenge schools face. Many schools are turning to a system called MTSSR to provide better reading instruction to all students. MTSSR stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support in Reading. What is MTSSR? MTSSR is a comprehensive system of reading instruction where the needs of all students are carefully and systematically addressed. All educators in the school focus on 2 main objectives. First, for those students who are on track for reading success, meaning they are reading at grade level, the school makes sure these students stay on track by providing high-quality reading instruction. Second, for those students who are not on track for reading success, meaning they are reading below grade level, the school provides the reading interventions necessary to help them get on track. Then, once these students are on track, the school makes sure they stay on track. These are the key objectives of MTSSR. What does an effective MTSSR look like? For a school to implement MTSSR effectively, it must do 5 major things really well. First, to keep students on track for reading success, high-quality reading instruction must be provided for all students. This is called core, or Tier 1 reading instruction. The school must also provide effective reading interventions for students who are not on track. Tier 2 interventions supplement and enhance Tier 1 instruction. This means that Tier 2 is always provided in addition to Tier 1 for students who require more support. For students who do not make progress with Tier 1 and Tier 2 instruction, highly intensive Tier 3 interventions are provided to meet individual student reading needs. Second, schools must know which students are on track for reading success and which students are not on track, so they can provide the reading instruction students need. Assessing students' reading skills directly and frequently is the best way to do this. Schools must also regularly monitor the progress of students who are not on track to make sure they are making good progress. Also, because MTSSR is a data-driven process, meaning the school uses data to make ongoing improvements to the system, the school must collect and use multiple sources of MTSSR implementation data to continuously improve MTSSR implementation and student outcomes. Third, all reading teachers, those who provide Tier 1 instruction and those who provide Tier 2 and 3 interventions, must have ongoing support, training, professional development, and coaching to provide the best reading instruction possible. The school must allocate the resources, time, and personnel for adequate training and support. The school must also ensure that all other educators in the building, the principal, coaches, specialists, and paraprofessionals, get the training they need to effectively implement and support MTSSR. Fourth, for all students, but especially for students who are not on track for reading success, families and schools must work together to ensure the reading needs of the student are met both inside and outside of school. This involves effective communication between the family and school, close collaboration, and regular monitoring. Families also play a vital role inside the school to support MTSSR by serving on leadership teams and helping to support students directly. Fifth, high-quality implementation of MTSSR requires school leadership. MTSSR leadership teams oversee all major aspects of implementation. Key leaders, including the principal, reading coaches, and lead grade level teachers, are actively engaged in the work. So, why does MTSSR hold promise for improving reading instruction and student reading outcomes? The fact that MTSSR is a comprehensive system of reading instruction means all educators in the building are working toward the same objectives: keeping students on track for reading success and supporting students who are not on track to get on track. As part of MTSSR, educators work toward these objectives in a consistent manner across all tiers of instruction. Instructional delivery in Tier 1 is similar from classroom to classroom and from one grade to the next. Reading interventions in Tier 2 are linked to core instruction and are aligned across classrooms and grades. The process of planning and delivering intense Tier 3 interventions is clear and systematic. Student data and implementation data is collected on a regular basis. Data is used consistently throughout the school to make decisions about the effectiveness of MTSSR. An emphasis on consistency creates enormous opportunities for the school to put in place a system of training, professional development, educator and parent support, and ongoing coaching for teachers, specialists, and administrators that is laser-focused on key objectives, is highly efficient, and is data-driven.
So let me stop this share and switch back over to my PowerPoint. Thanks, everybody. And I have something for you to think about now that you watched that video and heard the short introduction about MTSSR. I'm curious here to know how you are feeling about your system. So thinking about number one means you feel confident that your system is a right-sided triangle, meaning that your core is working the way it should. You have intervention in place, intensive intervention supports for fewer students, and in general, you are supporting a more efficient system. Some of you may be here because you're grappling with an upside down triangle or trying to right the triangle, where you feel your resources are heavily directed to intensive intervention. So for example, you keep continuing to see most of your students requiring intensive supports, and the core may not be working as optimally as you'd like it to. So you feel your resources are stretched more towards that intensive intervention, the intervention side of things. So number 3 is you're in a system where you feel, I think, stretched in all directions, basically. So you're solidly sort of working in the middle, if you will, trying to serve the needs of those intensive students, still trying to patch up your core, supplement that core to make it work. So that number 3 is sort of the sense of it is being pulled in all directions, and not quite your system is not quite in place to serve most of your students in the core. And finally, maybe you're unsure, you feel like you're going in circles, and you're here today to learn more about what the components of a multi-tiered system of support are. You're running in circles with number 4. There's no cohesion, there's no organization, there may be no leadership team, and you're really here to gather that information to move forward. So I would love to know where you're at with thinking. So think about this, and in the chat box, just enter 1, 2, 3, or 4. Pick the triangle that most represents your current system. I will give you a minute just to look at these graphics. Then I'm going to stop my share and bounce over and look at what responses are coming into the chat. So 1, 2, 3, or 4. I want to see if we have any trends in our audience related to these triangles. I'm going to stop my share and have you continue. A lot of 3s. Yeah, and definitely the going in circles. And I love, thank you, Dustin, that you did a 2.5. Thank you. That makes sense too, somewhere right between 2 and 3. Awesome. 1.5. That's great. So almost at that 1, but not quite. Great, everybody. Yeah, keep those responses coming in. And one of the things I'm going to do quickly is we have more videos to view today, and I just want to cue those up so that I have easier transitions with you. All righty. Great. Yeah, mostly 3, I think. And I think that reflects the reality of where our field is in terms of multi-tiered systems of support. So 3 is not a bad thing at all. I think it will require some of the shifts we'll talk about today. So this is helpful to see. I am in a very happy sense seeing that some of you are that 1.5 level too, that we have some of you representing systems that you have maybe really worked hard to kind of get to that point, and now you're looking at the things, the important systems components that will align with sustainability. So I think that's great that you all are represented as well. So back to that PowerPoint. I'm going to now take a shift, got to build some of our content. So one of the things I think I want to emphasize is it is impossible to implement multi-tiered systems of support in a silo. It requires coming together. It requires keeping together and then working together over time for success. We'll talk about continuous improvement and the continuous improvement process today. And I think that's what Henry Ford sets us up to think about with this quote. Important thing, I think you're already onto it, but that centrally, and it was one of the 5 principles in the video from Ensel about what makes a successful system is your leadership team. That leadership team is really key. Leadership, when I think about it, is certainly principals, yes, you and assistant principals, but it's also our lead teachers, grade level representatives. It's our reading specialists, it's our school psychologists, it's the counseling psychologists. So it is a special education. I don't want to ignore you and those who support our English learners as well. It is having some representative from those specializations and grades on this leadership team. So when I think leadership team, I think of distributed leadership, and this core team holds a really important place in MTSSR implementation. And that's something we've learned and continue to learn from our work at the National Center. We'll continue to share some conversations from the field throughout this session with you. I want to introduce you to Dr. Kimberly Miles. She's a principal at East Gresham Elementary School in Oregon. I have a couple of videos from Kimberly to share today, so you can hear a principal's story related to implementation of MTSSR. Kimberly speaks to sustainability. She connects it in the context of change, which I think is very important. How do you link sustainability and the commitment to continuous improvement? She speaks to that, and I want to use her ideas as a grounding for us as we move into our content. So just a minute, let me share this video from Kimberly Miles.
Ultimately, I wanted to build sustainability for change, not just that year, but in the years to come. So how can I empower others to do the work that needed to be done? We began our journey of really using data to make our path, and what did we need to do differently in order to facilitate the learning that needed to occur. So it was a lot of recognizing the hard work of teachers and students, but can we work smarter, not harder? So that's where we started. So building a school culture with the mindset and belief that we get to do this, we don't have to do this. And so that's where we start. And that was the first year of our journey, is really building a capacity for understanding of the work and how does what we do matter.
I really love that. The beginning is looking at sustainability for change and focusing on the essentials, right? So why are we building the system? Why are we investing in a comprehensive system of support for students? And Kimberly speaks to this importance of focusing on the essentials, the guiding principles, and centering on what we do and how we do it matters. So I think she's got some essential wisdom to set us straight as we continue to focus. One of the things that connects to what Kimberly says is connected to collaboration around vision. Collaboration around that vision extends from that leadership team that I mentioned. We'll get into who serves on a leadership team within the context of multi-tiered systems of support as we move forward. But essentially that leadership team is your central overarching umbrella group that helps steer MTSS, right? Steer the implementation of MTSSR, often led by your principal, maybe an assistant principal, and then members include grade level representatives, those representing specialists. So for example, your reading specialist, a special education teacher, school psychologist, serve on this team. If you've been to Patton and you've participated in Patton MTSSR initiative work, you are asked to come to those trainings as a leadership team. That's exactly who I'm talking about when I think about leadership team. Again, you may call that leadership team something different. You might have a different name for it, but in function, I'm looking at the function. What I'd like you to do is take some time to consider 1 through 10. These are key characteristics of what a leadership team knows and does to support MTSSR implementation. There's a rating scale up in the right-hand corner. Actually, I would like you to use a different rating scale as you think about these items. I want you just to simply use 0, 1, or 2. 0 means that these things are sketchy, they're not in place at all, or they're really highly inconsistent. That's what a 0 means. You may have some aspect of this in your system, but it's not there. So 0 covers it's kind of there, but sketchy or not at all. A number 1, if you score with a number 1, that means that you have aspects of these components in the works. Maybe they are emerging, maybe more work needs to be done, but you have some evidence that these things are occurring at some level, right? Number two is really that it's there, that this kind of thing is in your system and that it is established. And that's what you obviously were aiming for. So let's go down the list together here. And as I discuss these items, please just take some notes and reflect on your own system. If you are not on a leadership team, you can reflect just on the system in general, right? What you're seeing in the system in general where you work. So the first is that there is knowledge of important elements of strong MTSSR implementation. So look at 1 through 5. The team or individuals helping implement MTSSR in your building have strong core and instruction and intervention knowledge. They understand data use. There's a good PD in coaching. MTSSR school leadership is evolved and defined. And there's mutual support involving families and school. So 0, 1, or 2. Just mark that. Number 2 is the MTSSR leadership team meets monthly, and that's key. So we think about this leadership team, is there a consistent monthly meeting approach? You can meet more than that, sure, but monthly is what we're finding is sort of the target for sustainability and implementation. The leadership team members attend and participate in all professional development alongside the rest of the staff, 0, 1, or 2. Leadership team meets together to develop a coherent master schedule that protects reading instruction from interruption. So is making sure that schedule is there. 5, leadership team maintains a constant presence in settings, in your reading setting. With 6, 0, 1, or 2, consider if the leadership teams oversees and collects 4 different types of student data, right? The student data is you have universal screening, progress monitoring, diagnostic, and lesson mastery means data for your intensive intervention. Are students mastering lesson content? Lesson mastery data is essentially the data to help you determine if those students are meeting goals lesson by lesson, essentially. And remember, lesson mastery data is connected to your most intensive tier. So most intensive instruction aligned with most intensive information gathering through assessment. Number 7 is your leadership team oversees the collection and analysis of implementation data. Implementation data meaning, are you collecting data to help determine if you are implementing your core, for example, as intended? So that would be like a checklist. Is the core being implemented as the core is intended? 8 is the leadership team members understand and support the delivery of explicit and systematic instruction. We're now learning that explicit and systematic instruction is an essential variable in the implementation of high quality multi-tiered systems of support. And then is there support for professional learning communities? So when we think about professional learning communities, is there support for teachers who aren't serving on the leadership team to meet regularly to review student data and evaluate and implement instructional practices? Evidence-based instructional practices. And then finally, we're talking about additional supports for those educators implementing actual instruction. So are those supports there? What I'm showing you is a snapshot of some critical variables related to that leadership. And so this is your starting point. Just like Kimberly Miles said, her starting point was to do that information gathering, build the coalition, essentially what she was inferring, get the collaborative structures in place. And now I've got some items here for you to consider as your beginning anchors for related to MTSSR implementation. So I'm gonna be quiet for a minute, but review these yourselves and score 0, 1, or 2. I'll be asking you to respond with a couple questions in just a minute. So 0, 1, and 2, I'm gonna pause for a couple of seconds. So I'd like you to look through your scores for these 10 items and I want you to identify the item number. You have to pick one. You have to pick one item that represents the strongest element of implementation in your system. So for example, if you have a couple things scored with a 2, pick the one that you feel is really strong and in place. If your highest score is 1, pick the item there that you feel of the ones is your strongest one. And I'm curious, to know from our participants in groups what your strongest area of implementation is. And so I'll ask you to respond. You can respond with that item number in the chat. So we'll take a look. You can start doing that now. What's your strongest area of implementation? I'm going to come over and kind of watch what's coming up. 1 and 2. Knowledge, yeah, a lot of 2, meaning monthly. That, yeah, we'll talk about that. Makes sense. A consistent way to connect and meet, continue to build knowledge. And I appreciate that some of you are saying 1, because I believe as a field, and probably you all, we might know a lot about core instruction and intervention, for example, but maybe we aren't as confident about what PD and coaching means, right? How do you really operationalize PD and coaching in your system? Or the leadership piece, which we're talking about today. Or maybe the family bit is missing. Your connection to families is not as strong as it could be. And so you can't really get a 2 on number 1 if you have any of those components missing. So I appreciate that some of you are saying number 1, a lot of number 2. So that monthly meeting, we'll talk about how you can structure some routines to support monthly implementation of your system and what those monthly meetings will entail. And I did see other numbers come up. So great. So that was strong, right? Did we do strongest? Let me see. Strongest, right? Strongest aspect of your system. So now let's do area of need. The lowest. Put in your chat the area of need. So what are your lowest areas? So we'll start lowest. So I'm looking at 10, the professional development. Yeah, I will.
Can you share them again?
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. So in terms of your scores here, what is your lowest? Same, if you have a bunch of zeros, which do you feel really is strongly area of need? And if 1 tends to be your lowest score, what is which one comes out as most area of need? And I'll pop over and take a look. Yeah, 10, a lot of 10s. Groups are interrupted due to sub shortages, so the reality of infrastructure. 9, the professional layering, the professional learning communities by grade. Thank you. Yep. Great, 3 and 10. Fabulous. Thank you for your responses and your reflections. So I wanted to start here. This, I've already shown you a tool that can be used to guide your next steps related to the fidelity of implementation of your system. And it essentially is a deep lens look at what that leadership team is doing. that leadership team is so central. And so by using just this aspect to help evaluate and reflect on your system, you can start to prioritize area of needs for continuous improvement. So this bit that I showed you, the snapshot, we're already putting our foot in the water related to how we might support implementation. So I'll tell you more about where this comes from as we move through our content today and put it into context. So I'm just looking at more coming in. Yeah, a lot about leadership presence and ensuring a need is that leadership is participating visibly in some of the professional development work at a building. Also a lot with 9 and 10, I'm seeing quite a bit, which is more about how are we putting that professional learning in place to support ongoing support of teacher learning in the whole system. So great, thank you all. Back to the slides here for a little bit. I'm going to present a bit more, and then yeah, am I in the right spot here? I will present a bit more, and then we will move forward with that content. And I got to get to my right slide. Here we are. So essentially what I'm going to do is go through, and you'll see on my slide divisions section content that I have broken the presentation into the components that reflect this basic survey that we began with. So I want to talk to you about the knowledge, obtaining knowledge of these important elements of what strong implementation is about. So here are the ingredients of comprehensive multi-tiered systems of support for reading. And it requires knowledge of all 5 of these ingredients, these elements. These are the elements of an effective system to implement and sustain MTSSR. So we need knowledge of what core reading instruction and intervention is about. That's your effective evidence-based work to implement core instruction and intervention. Data use, there's got to be effective data use and understanding of what that data use is. And that data use involves both student data and implementation data. The professional development and coaching. So that might be an element to circle or to highlight for those of you who noted that that might be an area of need. It's looking at how do I align continuous professional learning to support the goals of the overall system. So that's your coaching and your job embedded support for teachers is your professional learning communities. We're talking a lot today about that MTSSR school leadership team. That's the lens I decided to take given the complexities of the system. So we're essentially coming in through the MTSSR school leadership team and then viewing the system from that perspective. Finally, we know from our work that linking to families and parents is really also key to sewing together these elements of an effective system. Mutual support for families and parents is a key aspect to the whole thing. And so if you've got, I saw for some of you who scored or viewed the triangles somewhere between a 1 and a 2, you gave yourself 1.5. If the family piece isn't there, that's a next step to take, is really to make that an equal element to the others in place. So this is at a glance what those elements are. I've got to have these in place to sustain a system. So that's the bottom line. I now have presented sort of the ingredients of what makes multi-tiered systems of support effective, but now I want to look at what makes leadership teams most effective. And we talked about having leadership teams meet monthly to plan and support MTSSR implementation. And I was happy to see that most of you have a regular meeting set up to do so. So as I walk through this content, see what resonates with you, what might be in place. And if there are other tools in here that can be used to enhance the monthly meetings that you have to plan and support MTSSR implementation. So a reminder again about your leadership team. Part of what we do as a leadership team is establish ourselves, but then help set up other teams in the building. So the MTSSR leadership team establishes, monitors, and supervises your overall MTSSR implementation. In addition to that, we set up classroom reading, instruction, and intervention teams. Again, we might call those different, something different, like a professional learning community at the grade level, for example. But essentially, those are operating around instruction. That's the purpose of those teams. They operate around instruction. They use student data to inform instructional implementation around adjustments that might be required to improve student reading performance. And then the final team is something called Special Education Eligibility Team. In Pennsylvania, I know IST teams had been in place, but these are essentially looking at response to intervention for students who are receiving intensive intervention, right, to determine if eligibility for special education is required. That is essentially the teaming structure. We're going to take it from the leadership team. I want to add in one more piece of essential teaming, and that is that outreach around parents and families. And this is just an example from ENSO on an infographic that we have created to help provide that outreach to parents and families from schools. As we conclude our session, I'll take you to the ENSO website, and if supporting families and parents is an area of need, we have lots of resources for you to pull from the ENSO website that you can just readily take and use to communicate with parents and families. So overall, we're talking about teaming, MTSSR leadership team, and PLCs, or classroom reading instruction intervention, special education eligibility, and parents and families. So four areas to consider. So same question to you. I want to know, and we'll do it through the chat, what team do you have most successfully in place? MTSSR leadership team, classroom reading instruction and intervention, special education eligibility, and a system for parent and family communication. So there might be a team there, or the leadership team has established a system. So which team do you have most successfully in place? And you can respond in the chat just with the team name: leadership team, PLC, or grade level teams, special education eligibility. Just, you can respond with a name in the chat. I'll leave this up a second and then just do a quick check-in. Great. And it's interesting, yeah. And I think I was hoping that I would see IST or special education, because that is right, we're required to do so. Several leadership teams. So a variety of different team structures are in place that you feel strongly about in your system if you had to pick one. So I'm seeing a variety of things here. Leadership team. And yeah, getting that leadership team in place in year one is fabulous. So you've done your first, just as Kimberly Miles said, you did your first major step. So I appreciate that from Jennifer. Good. Intervention. Yeah, so some classroom reading instruction intervention. So we'll talk about that. That'll be in our part 2 after break. And we'll look at that, what it means to set up a grade level team at like a PLC, and what those ingredients should be, right? What do those look like? Because I've seen that is coming through as an area of potential need. So let me move forward here and show you again leadership team. So we're going to look at this through the leadership team perspective. We want our leadership team meeting monthly, which is why we're leading in to this context here. So exactly, I saw Jennifer share that the first thing they did in year one of establishing multi-tiered systems of support was to put that leadership team together. I have listed there some example members of the team, including parent or family member. In our work with ENSO, we worked with parent organizations to provide input on our materials and work. They've suggested that at least two parents or family members are part of your leadership team. Often we have said one, but having two, a minimum of two at least, gives parents and other support to voice their interests, concerns, and questions within the context of educational professionals. So it basically strengthens that parent voice to have a couple parents included. We're talking about monthly meetings, which we'll discuss as we move through. And then finally, we will look at team responsibilities within this context. And those team responsibilities will help steer our implementation. So I did see a hand come up. Is there a question maybe you could enter in the chat? Was it about, yeah, Laurel, do you want to come off your mic and ask?
So I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So in terms of the leadership team, essentially, if you're on what would be considered a special education identification team, your building would then have, if you're a part of this MTSSR leadership team, you might have probably 2 or 3 potential leadership teams, because you would be on an MTSSR leadership team, and then there would be the what would be like the special education identification team, and then potentially like the behavioral the behavioral specialist team. Like, so
I got it. Let me clarify. I think your questions are good to sort it all out. So optimally at the building level, there's one leadership team, one MTSSR leadership team. That one leadership team is your umbrella. They oversee all the other teams at work in your building. They oversee everything else. So that one leadership team has the principal or assistant principal member. It has a grade level team representative. Basically, your lead teacher at each grade level attends. A special education teacher serves on that leadership team, school psychologist. Sometimes your English learner specialist or reading specialist might be on there. So that's your overarching team. It's called your leadership team. And we call those different things, as Jen Collins has said in the chat. But I'm referring to it throughout as your MTSSR leadership team, right? Your building leadership team. So that's your big umbrella. Under that team, you have a special education eligibility team, as you reference, and that team is really responsible for diving deep around the areas of eligibility, looking at students who might require special education, looking at performance data to determine response to intervention. And I know in Pennsylvania, they've referred to as IST teams, intervention, right, support teams. In addition to that, so there's more teaming. There's lots of teaming within an MTSSR system. We have grade level teams. Great, right? And that's very typical. Your grade level teams are also meeting. We call them grade level teams. Sometimes, and now we're starting to call a grade level team a professional learning community at the grade level, but that's the structure. So MTSSR leadership is your one team at the building that oversees it all. Yeah. Your question, it's great to have me pause and to sort it out. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so there are a lot of teams, but what helps streamline it is this one leadership building level team. Yeah, thank you, Laurel. I appreciate it. I appreciate the pause to ask that. So I'm going to switch back over to the slide. And now, of all the teams I just mentioned, we're going to stick with the leadership team because I want to talk to you a little bit about the functions and what this team does on a monthly basis. Again, they are overseeing the whole process. So your leadership team is essentially focused on continuous improvement of your system. And this is so important, right? We have such a complex, comprehensive system. We have to continuously evaluate it And through our evaluation, we have to prioritize because we can't do it all, right? You have to prioritize strategically. Those priorities lead into some kind of plan for action, and then the implementation of the plan. So evaluate, prioritize, plan, implement are the key components of how we implement an effective, excuse me, I'm going to pause and take a drink of water for a minute, how we implement an effective system. So many of you said that you meet monthly as a team. That was one of the strongest responses I got from the leadership team reflection we did. I want you, as I move forward, just to think about these things. So when you come into a monthly meeting, what materials are you bringing with you, right? What materials are coming with you to evaluate, prioritize, plan, and implement? Are you following an agenda? This is one of the big lessons learned, I must admit, through our ENSEL work. We met with lots of MTSSR implementation teams across the country, and through beacon site work, targeted work that we do through our center. And one of the biggest things we found was that some teams meeting monthly or not, but don't follow an agenda. There's nothing systematic in place that steers that team meeting on a monthly basis. And so if you're meeting monthly, but you don't have the organization or structure to those monthly meetings, I suggest looking at your resource packet for this example of an agenda. So I'll talk to you more about that, but that's just something to think about. Another thing to think about is the meeting process, who's doing what during those meetings, how you're defining your agenda, what you're focusing on, and how you communicate next up. So just think about that a little bit as I talk, and we'll come back full circle to that, the idea of the monthly meeting as we come through the content. So your leadership team is continuously developed around collaboration, right? We want that team to really be effective. We're all in this together. We have a mission to improve instruction for kids, for all kids in our building, feeling very strongly about that. You have underlying sort of commonalities that steer your team, and that then extends to what you do. So the regular assessment that you collect, you're holding accountability through, for example, the agenda I just talked about. But one piece that we sometimes overlook, because it's more of one of those qualitative things, but it's really key, is that we understand from research that our high performance workplaces, so our MTSSR systems that are most successful, are guided by principles that define what we do. And so what I'm talking about here, this MTSSR team that meets regularly and monthly, follows a systematic plan and agenda, is actually organized around a set of beliefs that drive the culture in that school and drive that success. So I'm going to share a short video. I just love this. It's conversations from the field. It just highlights how a school organized around a common set of principles for success. And just think about this, that this is really central to what you're doing as a leadership team. So let me switch over to my video here and play a little bit of that for you.
My name is Scott Drew, and I'm the principal of Aloha Huber Park. When I first got here in 2006, when we moved into this building, our achievement rate in the middle school was about 45% meeting or exceeding in reading and math. This year will be the 4th consecutive year that we're scoring in the high 80s and 90s. That's just a testament to all the hard work that our teachers do and the enormously high expectations that we have in this building to get each and every child to meet their individual goals and to show academic improvement. We've organized individuals in this building away from just individual silos into the concept of the team. And the way that we've done that is we've galvanized ourselves around 6 belief statements that we call our guiding principles.
We believe that all adult actions should impact student learning.
You can start your definitions, please. I will be calling you up to show me that your homework is done. Please make sure that you're using your time wisely in class to get your homework done tonight. Is that clear? Yes. Perfect.
By 6 guiding principles, we mean 6 belief statements that describe the work that we've been engaged in the past 10 years.
At Aloha Huber Park, collaboration drives our instructional practices to better meet the needs of our students.
And I think it's that team that makes Aloha Huber Park so unique.
I've seen a huge transformation. We used to work in our classrooms independently, and we've evolved from independent classrooms to collaborative throughout the school. We expect 100% student engagement.
McNasser, Darius, Jackie. All right, here we go.
Some of the new Common Core standards are asking students to design something like, for example here, a Pinewood Derby car.
You have to build a car out of a block of wood, and then the car has to weigh 5 ounces in order so it could race.
It kind of fits right into the engineering design standard, and at the same time, it's super exciting. The students just love coming out here. We get like 100 kids in the hall, and they're cheering each other on, and at the same time, it's very science related.
Instructional practices are aligned and coordinated to support all students.
I can see the results. What we see in the middle school is not magic. It's just all this process through the years that has been taking time, and it's an ongoing process, but we finally see results.
We operate in a complex and flexible system based on student need and proven practices.
We had some new records this year. Again, we're 90% poverty in the middle school and extremely, extremely high achieving, and we only take our kids from the elementary into the middle school.
At Aloha Huber Park, we have high expectations for all students and believe they can achieve regardless of race, disability, SES, or any other variables.
I really like Aloha Huber Park. My best and favorite subject is math. I actually got the highest score on Oaks this year.
Los éxitos que tiene Aloha Huber Park no creo que sean resultado de una persona o de 2 personas o ni siquiera de un equipo. La diferencia es que poco a poco fuimos teniendo una visión común.
What we say is a secret is there is no secret at all. You recruit and retain highly talented teachers with high expectations and place them in a system where we're all on the same page and similar belief systems, miracles can happen.
It's like perfect for you to be challenged and able to meet it. And then when you meet that expectation, then you can like go a little higher. And when you meet that, a little higher, a little higher.
So I'm back. What I love is that the students could articulate the vision. That's what I really love that. And so what we're saying is that leadership team, which we're talking about, sets that vision. And that vision might include some guiding principles for your school. And they might be they might be simple but profound. All our students will be good readers. The kids know that, right? So what we're talking about is this very qualitative feel that leadership team, you gotta set that vision and alignment. And it's not just important, not just our leadership team that's talking about that within the internal nature of that team. That vision is extended to the whole school, right? It's extended beyond. Everyone can articulate it. Even that precious little girl at the end of the video shared it as well. So that's we're thinking about. Gives me goosebumps a little bit. So let me bring it back to my PowerPoint here and move forward. So how do we set guiding principles? I just want you to pause and take that in a little bit. We're at this point where I'm getting you ready to evaluate your system. But before we go into that, what I've done is laid out some key essentials of what this leadership team does. And we're in the context of what do we do when we meet monthly? I want you to think a little bit about this. This is more or less what you might do with your first year of implementation in MTSSR. It is what you might refine if you are continuing to implement over time. These are some aspects to check in about related to sustainability and fidelity. So I'm going to pause, just take a look at this. These are reflection questions. It's also my chance to check in with you to see if there are any questions at this point. But we'll just have a pause here. Then we're going to step right into the continuous improvement process, and I will show you a tool that you can use to evaluate your system on an ongoing basis. So just some reflection here about your team. And great, I'm going to check in any questions to this point, and I will continue to pause and look. I'm glad you liked the video, and we could share the link. That's great.
Lena, there hasn't been any questions. We've been providing, collectively providing links to some of the questions. So
great, thank you. Perfect. Great. All right, let's go back over. So here we go. We're in the continuous improvement process. This drives what your leadership team does. I think if you feel ever at the point where you are lost in the weeds as a leadership team, pull back out of it and come to this. It's very basic, but what are we doing here? Are we evaluating? Are we prioritizing right now? Are we planning and evaluating that plan and implementing it, right? Are we carrying it out? So we're looking at these 4 components of a continuous improvement process to drive the implementation and eventual sustainability of your system. A sustainable system will not continue unless this continuous improvement process is cycling. So yeah, is it just a word? If you're ever in the weeds, pull out and ask, what are we doing right now? Are we evaluating? Are we prioritizing? Are we planning, putting together our action plan? Are we in the implementation phase? One of the things that we have developed at the National Center on Improving Literacy is a very comprehensive checklist. We call it our MTSSR implementation checklist. It is comprehensive and aligned with those ingredients, the core elements of an MTSSR system. So the MTSSR checklist covers considerations related to your core instruction and intervention, your data use, professional development and coaching, your school leadership, and mutual support involving families and the school. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this checklist. Then I'm going to go and access it and kind of walk you through so you can see what it looks like. My patent colleagues are sharing the Google link to this Excel spreadsheet in the chat. Please access that link. Get a hold of the checklist as I'm talking and download a copy for yourself. It gives you directions in the file on how to make a copy. I was also trying out this morning to make sure it was still up and available, and I was able to do it through a download, right? So I accessed the checklist and then it gave me the option to download it, and that's what I was able to do to get a copy here on my desktop. So do note this is a key aspect. How do you use this checklist? We're using it to evaluate your system. If I have an MTSSR implementation team, the leadership team, what we're going to do is use this checklist at the beginning of the year. Could be over the summer before you come back into school, but at the beginning and then again at the end, right? And it's always ongoing, right? Always ongoing, but it's such a comprehensive checklist. You're using it beginning and end and continuously using it. You're scoring the items. So this is a big Excel file. You're scoring each item on the checklist to evaluate your current implementation. And then the tool itself, because this is an Excel file and it's been programmed, it will generate a summative score. Right? It will generate a score for each sections. Another key feature of this checklist is that items have been designated with a priority. What are the most important items to put in place in your system? So if you're just beginning, what items would guide where should you start, basically? And you'll see priority items indicated. This is a priority 1, most important, priority 2, next important, priority 3 is sort of your enhancement. So if you had responded that your triangle's a 1.5, you're scoring this checklist, I'm expecting your priority items might be different than someone who's just beginning to implement their system. So yes, definitely go ahead and access that checklist. Please download a copy. This is one of the key tools we're covering in this session. And I really want you to have that on hand. This is a key driver in helping implement and sustain high quality multi-tiered systems of support. There are directions, again, like I said, on how to download that file. Optimally, what you will be doing is working together to complete it. So this is not the MTSS, if you have an MTSS coordinator, I saw a couple of you might serve in that role. This is not your job to complete this checklist on your own. This is intended to be a collaborative process completed within the context of your leadership team. So spending a few sessions, maybe in the summer, coming into the fall, to really work through this document to get a good handle of your system, and then returning to it again and again over time to refine your system. So it's collaboratively completed. That's why there's a note here that you work from a single copy to record responses for the team, not an individual process. It's a collective team process to complete this checklist. The way to score it is just like I asked you to score as we started our session. Scoring from 0 not in place to partially in place to fully in place. And because it's collective scoring, you're going with a decision that is the majority of your team. Yeah, we might have team members, maybe the grade level teachers see an item one way, and then we have specialists see it another. That's all right. We're going to look at number of responses within your team and go with the majority to indicate a score. The not in place, partially in place, and fully in place is exactly what I shared as we started. Not in place can mean there are instances of attempts to implement, but it's still so sketchy and inconsistent. So to get a 0 doesn't necessarily mean there's absolutely nothing, right? It's just sketchy and consistent. Partially in place means more like you're getting there. And 2, to be fully in place, that is really fully in place and yeah, implemented really well to score a 2. And then by doing this, by being honest about the system, it allows your room to grow and refine over time. So I want to show you a video about of a team using this checklist. Just watch how they discuss an item, watch how they complete the discussion together. I will tell you that this team is from Idaho, just so you know where they're from. I want to really thank them for being willing to have the ENSEL team film their conversations. I know that's a big deal. So they were willing to do so. They're sharing their discussion of this checklist. As they discuss, I want you to understand too that they are using an older version of the checklist. So you can see they have a paper and pencil version on the desk with them. The scoring might be I think the scoring is similar, it could be slightly different here, but I want you to see the process of what a team conversation using this checklist looks like. After we watch this, I'll go over and I'll pull up my file and just show you some nuances here, and then of the tool itself, and then I'll give you some time just to look at it yourselves and ask me questions. But here's let me stop, come over to my videos and get one ready for you here. Just a second. Whoop, let me make sure that you can see what I'm seeing. Here we go.
Okay, so now we're on administration, organization, and communication. Number 1, administrators or the leadership team are knowledgeable of state standards, priority reading skills and strategies, assessment measures and practices, and instructional programs and materials.
And I think that, Rachel, you've done a good job of making sure that principals know what's going on and giving them a background of what it looks like. And so I would say that
I think our principal team is probably ready to move towards a 2 there.
Yeah,
We've
I
had good
agree.
exposure, we have good talks about it, people realize that it's something they need to be paying attention to.
I feel like sometimes we have different interpretations of things.
No, friend, it's my way or the highway.
But I am going to say, based on, and it's not my voice that makes the decision, but based on the conversations that we have different places, that I feel like we're working toward a 2, but we're not a 2.
I feel the same.
And I say that respectfully, given that, I mean, just like with staff turnover, we have a lot of principal turnover, and none of these jobs are such that you can possibly know and become an expert at everything in 1 or 2 years, is my perception.
It's true.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say, no, we're not a 2, make it a 1.
I think our efforts are pushing us towards a 2, but there needs to be more work done.
Yeah. Do I feel like we're farther along than we were in September? Yes.
Absolutely.
But to say, check that off, like we've done that, we're moving on, that makes me a little uncomfortable.
We just ruined our score.
But anything that was fully in place, you could argue that with any of them, because if you don't, you will not stay fully in place if you continue the work.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you don't
I think
continue
we
working.
need to keep calibrating our understanding.
Well, and we need to keep training even our administrators, I mean, we say we've got to keep training those teachers and our assistants in the classroom, and so we've got to make sure that we're training administration too, so they know.
And I say that, partially because we have a new assessment measure in place this year. We have new ELA curriculum in the upper grades that is in its first full year of actually being adopted. So there's a few things going on that I feel like we're a work in progress.
Agreed. Just logistically, it is what it is, and that's what happens. 2 sounds great, but in progress is not bad.
I try not to be a total downer, but live in reality.
We're a tough bunch too.
Great, everyone. So sorry, my video's still playing. So I'm going to switch back over here and check in with you.
So what are your plans?
What I really, really like about that clip is the discussion. So that's what I wanted you to see, is they're using the checklist more of a vehicle for conversation. That is really key, and may or may not necessarily, I want to say score is kind of important because it guides that implementation and sustainability, but what is equally important is the conversation that team is having around those items. And so essentially it's a tool that guides the reflection of your system. Absolutely, it's really comprehensive, but it's comprehensive for a reason. It's comprehensive to really help steer conversations into the details that help build a healthy system. So pros and cons, I think it's like MTSSR is comprehensive, this tool is comprehensive, and that's with intention. So in reality, to use it with your team, you might have to have a few sessions dedicated to its completion and your discussion. Maybe you have a session around each element, for example. The thing to be aware of is its comprehensiveness. It requires some dedication to use it and to review it. But if it happens, what we're seeing is it's a real strong way to guide system implementation because the comprehensiveness of the tool matches the comprehensiveness required for MTSSR implementation. So I'm going to flip over to the tool, but I appreciate your comments so much. I loved the nature of that conversation and the very positive way we had. I think she's the curriculum coordinator, was the one who steered the conversation to really be reflective that we may not be at that 2, we may be at that 1.5, and I think you all are picking that up, and I really appreciate that observation. I think this was a great example of how we were teaming within this meeting. So let me now share the tool itself. So hopefully you can see I'm now in the Excel file itself for the MTSSR checklist. It starts with a cover page, start here. And if you just walk down, it tells you the guidance of how to think every time you come to look at an item, at one of the elements. It sort of guides your look into that. It gives you the way to steer it. What do we mean by data use, right? And so it's defined on this cover page of the checklist. I'm going to go to element 1, for example, and now you can see in element 1, we have the items here, section 1, we're evaluating things across tiers, for example, and I have the ability to rate a 0, 1, and 2. I'm just randomly going to put in numbers here just so you can see. I will then end up with a, because I haven't completed the ones at the top of the page, I'm ending up with nothing rated. You have to fill out all items to get your overall rating. On the far right, you have your priority level, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's just to note that yes, it's easy to get lost in these weeds and details, but one of the things this tool does is say, okay, look at item by item. Where's the priority? Is it a high priority? It's going to be a priority 1, a P1. If it's sort of your next step thing to do in your implementation of a system, it's your P2, net priority 2. And then there are some priority 3s. There are more enhancements, but that's there to guide you, to help you set priorities and pull out of this checklist how you can write, what you can do to focus. And across the bottom, you'll see the other tabs. So this tool will eventually be on the NSIL website, but currently we are getting it there. And so that's why I have the Excel file for you. So down the road, look to see this tool on the NSIL website, but for now, we are in the process of getting it, and you may certainly have access to the copy that we are using to drive the process. So back to my PowerPoint. I want you to just have a few moments here for reflection. Review that implementation checklist. And I want you to think about how you can incorporate that into your work. Optimally, this goes to a leadership team, and you would be using this within the leadership team context. If you are a lone silo and you're attending this session just because you want more information on MTSSR, your school and district has not moved to an MTSSR system yet, but you're here to learn, you might be able to take one of the components from this checklist and really use it to inform your instruction, or you might be able to use it to inform a PLC. So you might be able to take aspects of this checklist and just focus on those pieces. So you may certainly view it from that perspective. It's been designed for leadership team, building level leadership team use. So I want you, as I'm talking here, to pull that checklist up and take a look at it. Think about how you would incorporate. This is the driver of evaluation of your MTSSR system. So I want you to be aware of its use. Another thing I just wanted to highlight for you as you're taking a look at the tool is that you already completed many of the items that were included for leadership. What I did to start our session was to take basically a summary level of items and use them to begin our session. Those items that you filled out already today appear as items in the leadership element of the checklist. So that was one way I used it to get a pulse of where leadership team implementation is for the participants attending today's session. So a few more minutes to poke around. I want to come back and add at least one, maybe 2 more things to the picture here, and then we'll take a break. But let me see if I can get a couple more components of the continuous improvement process presented. before our break. So we talked about evaluate, and evaluate is using that checklist, right? Using that MTSSR implementation checklist to evaluate the system. So now if you've got a completed checklist, you can come into things through the lens of prioritization. Our experience in our work with multi-tiered system of support is circle number 2 is the hardest thing to do. Number 2, prioritizes. We have such a comprehensive system and many variables to consider that part of the hard work is saying, all right, I've got to focus. I've got to take a breath and prioritize. Prioritize what I will do related to implementation. So one of the process of working through prioritization is this, listed on your screen, guiding these 3 steps to help land on emphasis or focus. Review your checklist, right? Look at the checklist. What are the item scores? Where are the priorities? Are you scoring low in a lot of priority 1 areas? Immediately that says I'm beginning my system and there's certain things I need to pay attention to. The second is review the student data, what's happening or not across years of instruction. So intentionally, this checklist is meant to align and be used with your student data. You're bringing both to the table, right? And then that will help you determine the focus for an action plan, because I wanted to distill priorities down into an action plan that helps support implementation and coordinates everything for me. So number 1, 2, and 3, that's how you think about it. I just want to guide you a little bit on how you decide what's a priority. Priority items 1 tend to, but not always, but tend to focus on system infrastructure. So if you're just starting MTSSR, part of it is getting infrastructure. Infrastructure meaning put my MTSSR leadership team in place. And I love that comment that said, we're in year 1 and we've got our leadership team. That was great. So system infrastructure, your scheduling, getting your teams right, all of that is part of it. Getting my data schedule, infrastructure. Priority 2 is now we're emphasizing implementation. So I've got my infrastructure, but I've got to do something. So that's, how's my instruction going? How is my core being implemented? Are we collecting the data we need with Fidelity? You're looking at refinements related to implementation. And then finally, priority 3 are things that are like icing on the cake. They enhance your system, they refine and tweak it, they continually help build towards sustainability. But what I want you to understand is this, and I'm going to present this earlier than later, is that I don't want to get held up on priority item 1, building my infrastructure, and never get to delivery. So some of these things have to happen in a staggered way related to implementation. So I wanted you to pay attention to it. I have an example here of how you can work through prioritization. It's a very detailed example, and for purpose of time, I'm just going to tell you that it's provided here so that you can look at what how different priorities align with the how items on the checklist, align with the different priorities we've been talking about. But this is the main idea to walk away from. Don't wait. It does help set a priority, but you just don't get stuck in it. So don't get stuck on infrastructure. Do your infrastructure, begin your delivery, is what we're learning from the field. To help prioritize, sometimes you're looking for areas of synergy so that one area can feed on another area. So for example, if this is how I'm filling out items related to instruction and intervention, I've scored 0. Things like active engagement, and I'm in the second, for the element on instruction and intervention, if you're looking at the checklist. If I've scored active student engagement as a 0, progress monitoring has been a 0. On the area of getting 1, I've got student performance data. a 0, explicit, as a 1, explicit instruction as a 1. One of the things that I can do is look for things that connect together that I can work on simultaneously. And here's an example, not a lot of active and student engagement. Explicit instruction is a 1. I know that if I use good explicit and systematic instruction, that I'm able to improve student engagement. So it's kind of like a twofer, like, right? Or I put my emphasis on the explicit and systematic instruction, improve it, my active student engagement will improve. That's all. We're just looking for alignment of these priorities. And there's some additional examples for you here to show how to connect items where there's potential synergy. So back to my Idaho team, I want you to listen to their discussion. I had a video clip for you so you could hear them discuss things evaluate at the beginning of the year. They've been using this checklist, they're coming into the year and they were evaluating. Now I want you to hear the discussion at the end, right? Their discussion about how they're thinking about goals for next year. As you listen to that conversation, please write down what are some of the goals they're considering. And then I want you, when I prompt you, to respond in chat with what would be their overall priority goal. So I just want you to listen to this conversation, look for those themes of synergy. What do you hear from their conversation is a priority goal? So let me get them queued up.
Are to addressing this next year. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I think at Westside, I'd like to see us really dig into the IRI data and learn how to really truly understand it and what are the best ways to break it apart and use it and change our groups around.
I'd like to see more
often. Not having us change groups around, but having teachers feel free to do that.
Like not class to class, but class to grade. I think that would be way beneficial.
I love that.
Are you guys feeling that same? What are you feeling for next year?
Yeah, I would love to get to break down the data a little bit more and understand it a little bit more and base my groups on that more. And then I love the idea of going and working with second grade too.
Well, and the other big thing we're going to do is we're going to flat out try to add more time so that we can get some more of the one-on-one tier 3 tutoring or one-on-2. Because our kids, we're doing a good job with our walk 2 groups, we're doing a good job with interfacing with our special education students, but clearly we have a bunch of kids who need that extra boost. So we'll need to figure out a way to use that time wisely and see if we can give some more people some time, because what you're doing with your tutor is clearly working for some of those kids. So we need to provide that opportunity to kindergartners and also to second graders. Because remember, the earlier we can intervene, especially with those kindergartners and then the interplay with extended day kindergarten, that will buy some big impacts.
It's a handful of them. It's not just, the one is just because she was grumpy and always glared and stuff, and now she likes to read. So that she just stands out. But there's a group of them that have shown so much growth by having that triple dip that don't go to special ed. They just get that extra.
That's the goal, is we want to intervene early. Because if it's a developmental delay, or if it's delayed because they just haven't had as much access to reading and to sounds, that's why we want to do it.
Great, everybody. So I want to prompt you, what did you hear here in terms of goals? And I will answer that question about, is this leadership team district and building wide, just a second, but I can prompt you to put in, what did you hear about goals? What goals did this team talk about? And essentially, what did you hear related to priorities? And it's all right if we have varied responses, because there were several things talked about in this video clip. So there's that. And as you enter your responses, let me just define, this particular group from Idaho was operating their leadership team. It was actually for the sake of our videotaping, we combined 2 schools. We combined 2 schools here for the leadership team, and we added a couple district people, or one district person. The curriculum specialist for the district was sitting in on this team. We wanted to show, so there are two principals. Attending this meeting. The grade level team representatives are sitting here, as well as special education and reading specialists. And we have, she's the one who so politely steered the conversation in our beginning from not a 2, maybe a 1.5. She's the curriculum specialist.
Lena, some of the feedback in the chat are they've early intervention being a priority, focus on understanding their data, analyzing their data effectively, intervening early, empowering those teachers to make group changes themselves, and using data for instruction has come up several times.
Perfect. Thank you, Donna, for relaying the chat and responses. Absolutely. And you all are getting the threads of what those priorities are for this team. And so what I want you to do is hold on to that, because we have gone through, we have a tool, we have our MTSS-R checklist, implementation checklist, as a comprehensive evaluation tool that can steer implementation at the school level. And we will be using that tool along with student data to drive the process. We've evaluated with the tool. We've looked at prioritization, and you're responding to what you're hearing this team talk about with priorities. And when we come back from break, we're going to plan and implement, and then move on with some of our other content. But I want you to be ready to take what is being said here to plan and implement. So we'll stop right now, take a stretch break, move away break. I'm going to pick things up again. We'll jump right back into the continuous improvement process and how to use that MTSSR checklist and evaluation tool that I've been speaking about. A couple just clarifications on that tool and its use. So again, the MTSSR implementation checklist that we've been looking at is a tool that can be used to help evaluate your system. And then you can use that, the scores from that evaluation to guide priorities of implementation. The tool itself is part of this continuous improvement process. You'll always be returning to it and revisiting it, just like the team you saw discussing the tool. They were coming back to scores that they had completed at an earlier cycle. So it's continuously used. In practice, though, how do you set up that time to actually complete this evaluation? I think that's a question. There's a variety of ways you can do that, I think. One is, I know meeting monthly is the routine for the building level leadership team or the MTSSR leadership team. One thing you can do is stack a few meetings together at the beginning of the year, for example. So maybe you're meeting weekly during that beginning year implementation to complete the tool. So you're using each meeting to take another pass at one of the elements. A lot of teams that, at least through ENSEL that we work with, will set up some summer sessions before coming into school, and they'll complete the tool that way. One option might be is just, it's an investment for sure, but setting aside one day for that leadership team to meet and complete the tool. And that could be in the summer or as you're starting the year, for example. Maybe it's 2 half days, but the way to really do it is to look at the time you have. And having those discussions like we've seen from the leadership team from Idaho are really the rich way that you will be able to talk about how that system is working in a real way. So there's no real way to schedule or use it, just that you work within your own system to find those opportunities to do so. So more frequent meetings at the beginning of the year, just carving out the time. And most of our teams that we work with carve out the time. They'll set aside a half day or a day and use it. So that's the gist. So I'm going to jump back in. We're talking about the central role leadership the leadership team has in MTSSR implementation. We're looking at a tool, the MTSSR checklist, implementation checklist, that can drive this continuous improvement process of your system. We talked about evaluating, prioritizing, and now I have plan and implement left to cover. So let me just jump back over to our slides and pick things up with planning. So with planning, what you are doing is taking your prioritized areas of focus and using those to drive your action plan. And I think action plans hold a very important role in implementation. They are essentially your roadmap, right? So don't poo-poo action planning. I know we do it a lot, but this is really central for MTSSR implementation. What we want to do is have that guiding document. Why spend time on creating this action plan? This is also a routine and a document that can help sustainability. If I've got an action plan, if I have team members who change, right, and there's a turnover, or even if I have leaders like a principal or assistant principal leave, I have a central guiding document that's driving my system. So that action plan actually is a really important piece. That action plan focuses us on a goal. We are determining who, what, and how things are implemented. And it allows us to come and revisit that plan throughout the year. And that's your implement part, right? To drive implementation. I want to show you something that's really critical and can help you focus. Often we have action plans that cover many different things. And I want to help you focus within this very complex, comprehensive system. Watch as I'm putting these components, right? These are the elements of MTSSR on your screen. I've got 4 main elements of the 5 here: data use, PD and coaching, MTSSR leadership, and parents and families. Essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to drive everything through instruction and intervention. We know from our work in the field that instruction and intervention is the pivotal focus of this funnel of all of those components, all the elements within an MTSSR system. So to help you drive priorities in a focused way, what we are recommending is that always you will have a primary instruction and intervention goal, right? Your primary instruction and intervention goal. Maybe that's improving the consistency and cohesion of core reading instruction. That's your goal, right? Then look at this. Everything else will drive under that goal. So then how am I using data to support the improvement of my core? How am I using PD and coaching to support the improvement of my instruction and intervention goal? How am I using my leadership, right? My leadership team to support the actions of this goal? Drive everything through an instruction and intervention focus. You want to improve instruction, that's linked to outcomes for kids, right? We're putting emphasis there. So for example, the team we just looked at, they were circling around intervention, right? And how to use data to help determine instructional groups. That would be the goal, right? Using data, it's improving the use of my instructional groups. The data use is how am I using that data for grouping? How am I training teachers and providing PD around that? And MTSSR leadership, what are we doing as a team around that? I just want to give you this lens because I think it helps streamline through a very complex process. And then I've got an example action plan of how that would look. So you can take this away and see how the details drive it, right? This one in this example focuses on improving explicit and systematic instruction. And then finally, it's the implementation. We're carrying this out. So we're communicating that this is the action plan with all of our stakeholders, our teachers, those implementing in our building, the other various teams who will rally and focus on this. We execute it, we implement it essentially, and you're collecting data to determine its implementation success and where you need to continually tweak things. So central to all the elements, the ingredients, those 5 ingredients, elements of your MTSSR system is how we evaluate, prioritize, plan, and implement, and employ that continuous improvement process in our work. So essentially what I've got now is a system, right? We're completing an action plan, a comprehensive tool for that evaluation. prioritizing based on evaluation results, planning actions, driving those actions to a goal centered on instruction and intervention. We're implementing. And then next time we meet, we're going to evaluate progress again, right? It's continuous. So coming back to the MTSSR meeting process, there is this time where you're filling out the MTSS-R checklist, right? Completing it for the year to guide all this planning and implementing. But then your monthly meetings are steered around these sources of information, your universal data reports, your checklist that comes to your meeting so you can reference it. Your action plan comes along, data summaries at the grade level come along, and any action plans that those grade level teams do come along. That's the context for your meetings on a routine. Now we're talking about routine monthly basis. So essentially you have data sources, which I've put a box around here. So your data sources for school-wide view, and then you've got data sources, a grade level team view. Do note again in your resource packet that there is this sample agenda. And again, I'm passing on my lesson learned from our ENSEL work that teams require following a very specific agenda for these meetings. And we have the sample I think you can take away and use. It's essentially I'm bringing materials to the meeting. And then you've got the essential agenda items for how a leadership team will meet monthly. So just pause for a minute. I want you to look back at the materials that I presented to this point in time. Consider if you, I know very strongly you all said you've got that monthly leadership team meeting in place. Are there things you can add to it to make it more, explicit and systematic and structured? Are there tools here that you can use to bring back to that leadership team process to, maybe move you from a 1 to a 2 in terms of implementation? For those of you just setting up your team, go back quickly and just glance at tools here, kind of get them in your head about what we've talked about related to the essence of a MTSSR leadership team. I'm going to pause just a couple seconds to give you a chance to process where we are, and then we'll move forward in the content. Yeah, great, everyone. I'm going to present a little bit more, and then I will pause and check in to see if you have questions about the content we're discussing. So I'm going to move into another section of content and talk about some other things that the leadership team does to support reading, instruction, and intervention. A reminder, we've covered on the items that you use to self-evaluate about the leadership team this morning. We've covered the first 2. And now I'm going to just basically do a blitz, cover the rest of 2 through 10. I have them chunked in a meaningful way so that I can group like content together, but you'll get to see some thinking around the different items of that survey that you filled out. So overall, we've talked about number 1, the elements that make an MTSSR system a system. So those elements are the ingredients. We've got to have instruction intervention, solid data use, PD and coaching, a strong leadership team, and outreach to parents and families. Those are the elements. Then we've talked about number 2, the monthly meetings or the type of meetings that MTSSR leadership teams engage in. And within that context, we mentioned the continuous improvement process drives the leadership team meeting function, and a tool that can support evaluation and implementation is the MTSSR implementation checklist. So we've talked about those pieces. Now we're going to go a bit further and just talk about some important aspects. And I want you to hear voices from the fields, and I want to just add in some anecdotes and information to pull the importance of these things together and highlight them for you. So I know the reality is we are overstretched and we're at capacity, and it is very hard to attend a professional development alongside the rest of the staff. It's a challenge. But I can tell you this, what we do know is that when leadership team members do so, it's reflective of a stronger system. So it's worth consideration, right? It's worth figuring it out. We know that when leadership team members, and I mean, yes, the principal and assistant principal, but that can mean in addition to who's on that leadership team. When that leadership team and those members are present, that tends to suggest, a stronger system. So we're looking at that presence across different formats of professional development. It might be the traditional workshop. It might be popping into a professional learning community. It might be a grade level team event, showing up is something related to a training for families. That is all this leadership presence that we're looking at. There are 3 forms of professional development that are suggestive of a strong system. Absolutely, there's still a place for school-based workshops. The purpose there is to get knowledge, right? This is the knowledge building aspect to learning. Then with job embedded technical assistance and coaching, that's essentially having support for teachers in the classroom and professional learning communities, and even a discussion of outside of the classroom, but it's very much aligned with what I am, if I'm a teacher, what I'm teaching. And then that's supported in an ongoing way, right? So we have school-based workshops still have a place there, knowledge building, and on the other 2 are more about how we use and apply that knowledge. So I want you to just listen to what this team says about attending professional learning, and I'm going to ask you to respond. What did you hear them say in this video example of their discussion? So they're talking about this very item on their checklist. So I'd love you to just let me know what you hear them saying.
Because last year, anyway, especially like that November one, I would like to go, and I think there's probably some other principals who would like to be trained.
I actually think that's a very good idea. Not all principals, and understandably so, but not all principals have a deep understanding of systematic explicit instruction, and it gets back to you don't know what you don't know. And I think one area where we struggle to have fully in place is pacing. And when the pacing is too slow, that's when kids get off task and behavior problems arise. And so it would be very helpful if principals were able to come, the principal leaving with a clear understanding of systematic explicit instruction, I think would make a big difference.
And they need to come, because actually the worst principal in that is me, because I have pretty good background, but I will totally do it wrong if I don't get a refresher.
I had no experience
Trust
in the
me.
younger grades and was able to jump in a title group and try to, I wasn't very good at it, but it was great practice. And the boys in my group corrected me on how I should be doing it.
Which is actually fantastic because
They were
they
trained.
knew the instructional routine.
Yeah.
That's good.
All right, I gotta switch back over. That's the gist. If you want to just summarize what you heard them saying in the chat box while I get the next, we're gonna jump into another video example in just a little bit, and I want to cue that one up.
I think time.
So what did you hear? What did you hear that group talking about? Yeah, thanks everybody. And I want to point out, if you haven't sort of figured it out, there are the two principals in the group. The gentleman with the glasses, he's one, and the other young woman, she sits at the front near the video, and she has a floral top, yellow, blonde hair pulled back, and she was the one who said, and I had to take over a group. And maybe I didn't do it quite as fluently or well, but there was I had to take over a group. So that's who the other principal is in that discussion. And I thank you for your notes. Yes. One of the things I wanted you to know, this was a real conversation. We did not stage this. This is not scripted. So we went to a team of teachers and school district who we had been working with for quite a while with our ENSEL work, and asked if we could do this to film their conversation. So it really is real. They were really having conversations about their system using the checklist that we're talking about. Yeah. and so exactly this, the note here is attending professional development focused on explicit and systematic instruction, and leadership, is our leadership doing it? And they were honest and said, well, you know, I feel like I have knowledge, but it could be better. It could be better. And so they are now having that conversation to sort that out and how to make it work, how to get the leaders there to attend. So that's one thing to note here, attending and having that presence at those professional development events. We know it's one of the critical pieces to implementing a sound system of support. So that was the third item, right, that you had thought about. So let me go on to the fourth, and that's the leadership team meeting together to develop a coherent master schedule, protecting reading instruction from interruptions. So that's going into the context of saying, okay, I'm scheduling reading first. That's essentially what it means. I'm going to schedule reading first, and then I'm going to figure out how to fit other things around it. And if we have to have assemblies and fire drills and other interruptions, that we will take out from other time and not necessarily reading instruction. So that we know also is a real key thing that leadership does. And so I want to go back to Kimberly Miles again and let you listen to what she's saying related to protecting that schedule. And this is just a quick note. I think she says it very powerfully and it's worth hearing.
I think time is our most precious commodity, and so I need to be really mindful and protective of the time that we have here with students on campus. So we have instructional blocks of times that I ask all teachers to adhere to, and it's really important to use each instructional minute in a way that's beneficial to that child. So it's not only the instructional minutes during the day, but it's the time that I have with teachers before and after school. We use that to enhance our own learning, enhance our own instructional practices.
Our principal makes it a priority for reading. She has since day one set a block schedule for us so that we have the time we need and the tools we need to teach reading. She's given us resources, she's given us PDs, and she's invested her time in us so that we can, in turn, support our students. Having an administrator that supports reading instruction is so important because they're the foundation of what we do here. We can't do it without support from our administrator. We can't, we don't have the resources, we don't have the time, we don't have the encouragement that we need if we don't have an administrator that's there for us. She digs in with us, she's in the classroom, she's teaching reading, she's doing small groups, she's coaching alongside me as I'm coaching teachers. She's so invested in our students. And the change that we've seen in the 5 years of our model program has been amazing. We've totally shifted the kids from being non-readers to leaving our school to go to middle school as readers.
Excellent there. So yes, that leadership presence is so key. And I'm going to add just a little bit more and have you think about this. So back over to my slides. So what we've been talking about is leadership around professional development, the leadership team's role in instructional time. This segues over into and connects to this fifth item you thought about, leadership having this constant presence in the building around reading instruction across settings, in the building, in the classroom, with groups of teachers. And I do want to now speak to my principals and assistant principals who might be attending, and those of you maybe like an MTSSR coordinator who really take a leadership role. We know effective systems are tightly linked to this. It's presence, physical, otherwise, in the building. And what the key is to not become isolated and siloed, but we know, at least from what we see from a systems implementation, that leadership presence and being able to see that is tightly connected to the success of a system. So what I'm trying to outline today and just share what we know are the big ideas, the ingredients that make a successful MTSSR system implementation. We want that implementation to be successful and sustainable, and it's linked to presence. It is linked to presence, and I do want to speak directly to principals about that. What you do matters, and that leadership presence matters. So I'm going to just pause. We now just covered a transitional set of those items related to presence and scheduling, prioritizing. I call it, guys, prioritizing and leadership presence. So do think about that. What does leadership presence mean to you? And as a leadership team, how can you leverage your presence more effectively to challenge yourself to be there at events and at your professional development and training? How can you challenge those things? And as you're reflecting, please let me know if you have any questions to date, and I will continue with the content after checking in. So just a couple seconds. So I'm just going to check in to see if there are any questions, and certainly share reflections throughout. I love and I appreciate how you all can just note a reflection or observation as we're sharing content. So I appreciate it, Jacqueline. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So let me bounce back over to our.
I am not either, Lena. It seems that administrator involvement and learning really is key, and I don't see any questions around that.
Yeah, great. Fabulous. Okay, we'll go back over here to the slides, and I want to now talk about another section of content. So we used that, we sort of took a breath and thought about leadership presence, prioritization of reading. And now I want to shift a little bit into more serious work about what the leadership team does. So we're building across those survey items that you completed at the start. Right, we've moved from what are the elements of MTSSR into what the MTSSR team does through continuous improvement. We talked about leadership prioritization and presence, and now here we go into what the leadership team does with data. So I'm going to take some time to walk through some components of that with you. So one of the things we want to look at is how the leadership team oversees the collection and analysis of four types of student reading data. Four types of student reading data commonly used in MTSSR implementation. I will discuss those four types. And one of the things you can do as I discuss those is reflect a bit. Is your system stronger in collecting certain forms of data than the other? And so use that as potentially to guide next steps. To talk about data, however, this is where I need you to see the MTSSR school-based leadership team as connecting the whole system. They're the umbrella, as I mentioned before. But what I want to drill down and why MTSSR leadership is listed side by side with the classroom or grade level reading teams, those grade level teams or PLC teams, is because they use data differently. And just let's talk this through, and please read the content on the slide as I review it, but notice the differences. So as I said, the MTSSR leadership team meets monthly. They're looking at things from a systems perspective. They're using data, right? They're helping coordinate that data. Screening data is essential because that's helping determine what tiers of instruction need to be provided for students. So they look at screening data. They're using systems data and grade level data to make some adjustments. But again, those adjustments are at the systems or the school level. And then through that, they're providing support to teachers. Notice the difference in data use. On the right-hand side, we have classroom reading, instruction, and intervention teams. Those are your grade level teams traditionally. Sometimes we're now calling them grade level PLCs. But what those teams are doing, they're taking a deeper dive of the data and looking at classroom, group, and individual student data. So contrast systems, school-wide perspective from now classroom, group, or individual perspective, right? Classroom, group of students, instructionally, or individual students. Part of that process is to connect what they're doing to new practices. So their ongoing learning, trying new evidence-based practices, adjusting their instruction, and increasing the systematicness of presentation. So those things are also done. It's just not about looking at data. There's more related to implementation with what these teams do. They're reflecting and planning on instruction. So those two, and I'm going to cover the data as we get into the next section. So the kind of data we're collecting include 4. I think you're very familiar with, at least 1 through 3 or 1 and 2. So universal screening data, right? That's the benchmark data that you collect beginning, middle, and end of the year. That's getting a sense of your system, right? Getting a sense of your system and how your core is looking at the health of your core, where intervention needs might be. Progress monitoring data is collected more frequently to see if students are meeting goals. Diagnostic data, we now drop down into more intensive data collection if we need to figure out more specific strengths and needs of those students receiving instruction in our intervention tiers. And one final piece we have to talk more about collectively, I think, as educators. And I, for sake of time, I just got to highlight it, but that's lesson mastery data. So think about, is student lesson mastery data collected for students receiving intensive intervention? So I definitely want lesson mastery data at the tier 3 level or aligned with your most intensive skill groups. Lesson mastery data is essentially the assessment checkouts provided in your intervention program that help you determine if students are mastering that content or not. But we really want to look at mastery when it comes to that tier 3 implementation. And that is essentially what that is. So we're looking at instruction and intervention across tiers, summarizing exactly what I said. So you're welcome to come back and take a look at that. One of the things I want you to understand is an essential tool for MTSSR implementation is some kind of assessment plan. So the assessment plan is completed at the MTSSR leadership team level, but grade level teams have a role in completing and filling out this as well. So this is really a school-wide document. But again, trying to show you the essential things to fill out. Action plan, data plan, for example, use of an MTSSR agenda for meetings. These are the tools to have in place to support sustainability. If these are well documented, the things I'm mentioning and presenting today, it's easier to sustain a system, right? I know you all are doing such work, hard work. So we think about the challenges in a system, turnover, for example, shifts in district administration. If some of these tools are in place and completed, it anchors things for sustainability, right? There's a little more, give in turnover and challenges to a system. So for example, this data plan is a must to steer it. So identifying your data sources, and we're talking about the first 4 now, hold implementation data in just a minute. And then on the left-hand side, it's trying to figure out the logistics, identifying the measures you have in place, what your timeline is for collection. So what students are being assessed, who's the school expert to go to on implementation, right? Who knows those measures really well, who's going to collect the data. And I know these are in the weeds sort of things, but they're the things that we figure out and identify to really help build the health of a system. So all the way down to who's entering the data in your database and how's it scored. If you have an MTSSR coordinator, that person might take the role of overseeing this because it cuts across, as I said, your leadership team and what school teams do. But this is a key document, and it's in your It's in your resource packet. So with the data now, the leadership team oversees the collection and analysis. So we want to look at this from, again, school-wide building level perspective and how the data informs what we're doing. So we have a variety of implementation data that requires collection as well. So think student data and implementation data. And I would just share with you directly that I think, at least with our ENSL work, we find that school systems are very strong with student data collection, but maybe not as much with implementation data. And that implementation data is an area where for systems that are established, you can grow, right? You can grow your system and take next steps. So implementation data is your check on how things are going. How is implementation? So how's your reading instruction being implemented? How's your professional development being implemented? What about your school leadership team? I kind of want to check on my school leadership team to make sure I'm following agenda. I meet monthly. I'm using the MTSS-R checklist and suited data. I got to have a checklist aligned with my leadership team. School and family data. This all relates to implementation, and data can help you improve your system through that support. So implementation data connects to fidelity of implementation. One of the things I know we grapple with MTSSR implementation is implementation of, say, the core. How do I know that the core is really successfully implemented? One, I can certainly tell from student data, right? If my student data isn't strong, I know my core may not be healthy. But the other thing is, I can use that fidelity of implementation to assess fully if my student data and that my core is successfully and consistently and cohesively being implemented. I have assurance that where I can work is at the upper tiers, right? More intensive tiers of instruction. That fidelity plays a really key piece. Right? We can't really think about tier 2 and unless we know a core is implemented with fidelity. So I want to think about that as one of these components for systems level implementation, right? What information do I know about that reading instruction? So the whole idea, the purpose is not to be evaluative. It's not, the collection of implementation is not to be evaluative. It's to see whether that program is implemented as intended. So what we want to look at are the lessons being implemented as written, for example. And that, like, maybe there's part of the program that teachers have difficulty with because it's not written well. So I want to know about program implementation. Are the routine components delivered? So in your core reading program, are we delivering all 5 big ideas, for example, of that program aligned with the big ideas in reading? That's where we're looking related to this. So I wanted you to hear a discussion from our leadership team about implementation data. And let's listen to that. And I'll come back over. I do see a question about the improvement of the school family piece. So I'll hold that one. Let me play this video here. And then we'll come back over and talk a little bit. Just a second. I'm going to share my screen. Try again. Here we go.
Tier 1 core program materials are implemented with a high level of fidelity. We gave ourselves a 3 on that last time instead of a 6, fully in place. So that would be that equity piece. And
that's a super hard one to be fully implemented.
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking tier 1, that's our core resource, which is Journeys.
Reading.
Well, and again, because in my building, yes, it's fully implemented and in place. Fran, in your building, would you say it's fully implemented and in place?
In some grade levels.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In others,
it's a little thorny,
it's
huh?
It's a little thorny. That's a good way to say it.
That's a good way.
But Fran, the whole thing with that being thorny, is as we've transitioned from the legacy IRI to this new one, you know, having a curriculum that addresses all 5 components of reading and teaching with Fidelity should start to have an impact. At least that's what the research says. So
When we look at a high level of fidelity, in my mind, that doesn't mean just reading the stories and doing the activities, but understanding the why between them, behind them, that reading research piece, and what does close reading look like? What are the students doing during close reading? What is the teacher doing during close reading? I feel like we have some work to do there because, I mean, for one thing, we have a lot of turnover in our buildings. And unfortunately, with that particular resource, we had implementation training when it was a brand new adoption. And now there hasn't been more ongoing training other than opportunities for teacher to opt in to take a class taught by a coach. And so to have system-wide implementation with a high level of fidelity when you're thinking about the research behind why we're doing those things and understanding the roles of the teacher and the student in all 5 areas of reading, I question.
that's going to be a growth area, because the other thing too with Journeys is how old are we? 6 years in?
This is
5
our
years?
4th year.
Okay, because it's been, we're a long ways out on big training.
Yeah.
Kendra, did you get any of that training?
I didn't, but I had one previously when I was student teaching. That district had the
Right.
same program.
Exactly.
So that's the only reason I'm as aware of it as I am.
Right.
So
I
if
mean,
we got
it's super
any,
hard because you're not pretty experienced. We have
Yeah.
lots of teachers with fewer years.
All right, let me.
Tier
whoop.
1 corporate.
I will come back over in just a second. So any questions you have, put in the chat. I did see one about the parent and parent involvement and how to enhance and improve that. So I will address that. What I want to do is get my next video queued up for you while I am making my transition. And we will make that here. All righty, here I come.
Lena, I also had some questions and really looking at the framework. This is a district leadership team looking at data. There was discussion or questions about, you know, are the teachers looking at that data? You know, and I think also where does this framework really starts at the district level and then how it gets down to the building level. So that was kind of a thought that was going through as well.
Yeah, that's a great, I thank you all for noticing that. So I will speak about different, so within a system, we have different levels of support. We have, and I want to take a big picture now with you all. We have state, right? It's what the state does. It kind of starts there too. So for example, what Patton is doing to support MTSS and initiatives. We have what districts do. Districts absolutely have a role in setting to the context. And then we know where the change really happens and where we have direct level of impact is school. It is at the school level. So yes, all these things are linked and connected, but where we have the most impact and where we really can, you know, affect change is at the school level. And so what I would like to do is show this through the school level lens, really. We happen to have a leadership team that combines 2 schools and a much larger district. So I still kind of think of them as a school level team that we're viewing in discussion. Your question is so absolutely on point, and your conversation is so absolutely on point. Just to note that at ENSEL, not only are we developing the school level checklist that we are talking about today, but we have a district level version, and we will also have a state level version. And these will eventually be on the ENSEL website as we work to disseminate. So we recognize the alignment is really key here, and there will be a district as well as a state level showcasing leadership today because we started with the school level and we knew that that is an area to impact change, and that's where I wanted to drive the model. So excellent question about how those all connect. So Donna, I'm going to answer the parent piece, and then if there are other questions, just take a look for me and relay those. But one of the things I do want to acknowledge, I think that parent-family communication piece is so key, and I'm glad we have a question related to that. One of the ideas, how do you make that stronger? One, fundamentally, is to have parents on your MTSSR leadership team if you don't already. Yes, we typically have been in like a closed system, if you will, in education, but to get a couple of parents to serve with you and your teachers on that overall MTSSR leadership team is a great step forward, and it brings the parent voice right into play. So if you haven't done that, I suggest that as a first step. The other thing we've noticed is with parent and family communication, one of the very successful things has been to hold ongoing open house family nights, celebration nights around reading instruction, kind of an open house, if you will. We've seen these done like in person in buildings, but also virtually. Right, you could hold a virtual open house related to reading performance and really celebrate it, gear it up, and use as an opportunity to share things with parents aligned with the system level information we're talking about today. This has been, and I will promote it because it's been very successful. The National Center on Improving Literacy has a whole set of resources for family and for families and parents, supporting that communication aspect, tools that you can use in these open house sort of situations, virtual or in person. There are videos to share, there are materials to share, infographics, lots of things you can use to assemble into an open house that would sort of help do the bridge and outreach to families. So I think that's the second very doable thing you can implement, and there are resources to support it. So it's not like you are creating anything. You just go to the NCIL website and National Center on Improving Literacy, and you will find that family and parent information there. So yeah, I'll say that. Donna, I know Patton has been very successful using that model as well, too, the open house idea.
Yes, absolutely. And family resources are also on our website as well. But the NCIL does have a really strong family component on the National Center for Improving Literacy. So do check that out as well. We'll put that in the chat again.
Great, thank you. I'm trying to think. I think Donna, just do a quick check. Have we caught the questions that have come in?
The only other question was about the impact on pre-service teachers. Should this framework be shared at the pre-service level?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are evidence-based components within this context, so it's very appropriate as a model for pre-service teachers. So yeah, and I know we are doing a lot of work at the systems level and aligning pre-services and in-service constantly ongoing, right, work in our field. And of course, more needs to be done for sure, but with that, yes, yeah, absolutely. These things should be part of a pre-service training. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and Pennsylvania has really been focused on that as well.
Yeah,
as a
good.
state.
Good. All right, let me bounce back over and I'll kind of frame where we are in the context of the presentation. So we just heard this team talk about implementation data, and I said where we are now, there's two forms of data you need to be looking at for your system. It is absolutely student data, and the student data, 4 pieces: screening, progress monitoring, diagnostic, and we have learning mastery, which may potentially be an area, if you're an established implementer, to look at more closely, is what lesson mastery is. We are also saying Implementation data is key to understanding your system. And this is where the Fidelity piece comes in here. And what do I want to now, you heard this team talk about implementation data and how they might use it to improve their system, right? To align with training needs. For example, what does their implementation data say about their use of journeys, their core reading program? And what does that mean when they, for professional learning, for teachers? That's the connection they're trying to make. I just want to show you, these are all examples, just what this type of data might look like. So on one side, we're looking at your core and program, for example, and you're just looking to see, are these components in place, the big ideas of reading, and are they fully, partially, or not taught at all? Some lessons don't say they may not have a vocab component until the subsequent lesson, so it would be an NA. But at a very basic level, we're looking at these components. Big ideas of reading is the program that is implemented addressing those. Another piece of that are the evidence-based practices there that support implementation, positive classroom environment. Materials are organized, there's good management, basic evidence-based practices of instruction. So it's collecting this. Yes, it's observation data. Yes, it is going into a classroom to see if this is implemented. It's not evaluative. We're looking at our system. We're looking at, okay, I need to make decisions about my core, as you heard that team to talk about. Is there knowledge of that core that we have to address in a different way at the school level? Here's a more detailed view. I just want to show you that sometimes a program will have a checklist related to implementation. This is from the program Enhanced Core Reading Instruction. This is very detailed, but you can see this is provided along with that program related to what is good implementation for this program. And this gives you an example of what that might look like. So your program might have something you can use that's directly aligned with it. Another thing, I love doing this in classrooms. It's one of my favorite ways to get a sense of implementation is just to do tallies for various things. So every time students respond as a whole group, I might tally. Every time the teacher calls on an individual student, I tally. Every time some kind of feedback, an error correction, or academic feedback is provided, I might tally. It just helps to see how engaging that classroom is. Are there a lot of student responses? And maybe there's no kind of real right way to do it. You collapse group and individual. If they're just a response from the students, you really want that data to reflect engagement. And so don't forget, you just sit and do some tallies related to that. I wanted to show you, this is some data my good colleague, Carol Disson at the University of Oregon collected during some of her work in the National Center on Improving Literacy. She was working with a set of schools in Hawaii, actually, and she was helping them focus on implementation data. So this is an example of how she used, and she was following an ECRI, Enhanced Core Reading Program. That was the program implementation. And this is an example of just how she collected and tallied her data. So you could see trends across different components of implementation. And now she knows where to go back in and provide training in areas that require further support. It's actually, the data looks pretty good. We want to be up at, around 80 to 100% implementation. So in general, but I can then focus to the right of my screen. Blending is really hard. Right use of regular words is really hard. And so that then tells me as a leadership team that we need to have our coaches go back in and provide support in these areas to improve performance. So graph it. Okay, so we looked at implementation data, or we are looking at implementation data, and part of your implementation data aligns with your core program. So you're looking at these core features of instruction. We're learning, and I mentioned this earlier in our session, that MTSSR implementation, stronger systems have higher levels of explicit and systematic instruction in reading. That is prolific use of an I do model, right? We're practicing with students and then we help them apply the content independently, but it's very explicit, it's very systematic. So this is isolated as a separate area to consider when you're looking at implementation data, is how explicit and systematic that reading instruction is. We know it's key. And here's a way to define explicit and systematic instruction. One is you hear instruction that's explicit and systematic, and the language is so intentional, purposeful, and streamlined. There's no extras in that. You really use instructional language to focus for students. You'll hear that explanation of a task. You'll see the modeling, as I said. Then there's the practice for students, right, with review for them to apply. The other side of explicit and systematic instruction is high levels of engagement. I alluded to that with your core, but this is something now to drop down deeper and check. You're checking for understanding, correcting student errors, constantly getting feedback from students. So this is something in and of itself to look at related to implementation. And so I've circled it here on this sample checklist. So implementation data. 3 sort of areas here, right? You're making sure you're covering big ideas of reading. It's aligned with evidence-based practices. That's on your far left. I just added explicit instruction because we are starting to see that as a bellwether component for a successful MTSSR system, and other just good evidence-based practices that are high mileage for quality instruction. I'm going to show you Anita. She is the, I think, premier example of someone who provides explicit and systematic instruction. I hope you've seen her before, and I want to share, because she is such an example of what this sort of instruction looks like. And what I want you to do while you watch Anita is to think of these factors. Number 1, watch her instructional language. Number 2, watch her engagement. And after the video, I want you to share in chat what your observation is from her instruction. So let me come over and cue up my video to show just a little bit of this explicit instruction and what it looks like, because it is so, so, so key. So let me stop my share, come over and cue up my next video, and we'll see Anita. She's going to be teaching cause and effect to 3rd graders.
We have read this story and we are going to reread it. And today the comprehension skill we're going to work on is this. It is cause and effect. What is it, everyone? Cause and effect. Well, when we have a cause, it is always something that happens first. So the cause always happens what, everyone? First. We have this cause, then as a result we have this what, everyone? This effect. And we have this effect because of the what, everyone? The cause. So we have a cause, then we have a what, everyone? An effect. We have this effect because of the what, everyone? The cause. So my turn first. So for example, this morning I was hungry, so I had breakfast. I had breakfast because I was what, everyone? Hungry. I was hungry, then I had breakfast, and I had breakfast because I was hungry. It's Halloween, so then the children dressed up in costumes, and they dressed up in costumes because it was Halloween. And it's Halloween, so they dressed up in costumes. They dressed up in costumes because of Halloween. Okay, all right, up here. The boys and girls were in 3rd grade. Then they learned how to read. They learned how to read because they were in 3rd grade.
Okay, you get it. I know you get it. So I'm going to stop and come back over. and just ask for you to tell me, goodness, what's going on with language? What's going on with engagement? I hear those kids responding. And I know just because of the video angle, I know she's trying to signal with her head to get them to respond at the same time. So they're signaling there. But it's, I think, a really just short highlight example of some explicit instruction. And we're looking for that in classrooms, right? With across all content within our multi-tiered systems of support. Yeah, thanks everybody. And I agree. She's got it's not a textbook book on explicit instruction. I highlighted it on the slide there by Anita Archer. Great. If your school's working towards this and you need to build the explicitness, that would be a great professional learning community text to study together for a year. She provides videos. I got this online as part of her textbook series. She's posted several videos for elementary and upper grade students online, so you can see and look at the instruction. They align with this textbook. It's worth the investment. It could steer a professional learning community, which I'm going to talk about in a minute here. Great, everybody. And I am going to answer this, otherwise I'll forget. The question was is the Ensel district district checklist ready yet? It is not ready yet. It almost ready, but I don't have that to disseminate yet. So I'm really sharing with you sort of, we are cutting edge work. The whole package of things related to these checklists will be coming soon on the Ensel website. But we are actively using the school level one right now. And I think I could tell you, maybe if I have some time at the end while you all are doing a breakout activity, I can look for it. There's an older version of the district one, I think online. If I can search it, I'll put the link in the chat. So remind me to multitask when I get to your final breakout, and I'll look for the older version, an older version of a district checklist. Fabulous. So let me come back over to the screen here. I want to again get out of this. I want to make sure I have my next one queued up for you. All righty here. All righty. Okay. And now let's go back over to our slides. So we're looking at Anita and Archer, and I just wanted to highlight that's such a key piece here of instruction. So more with the leadership team. I want you to know that the leadership team supports what's happening with the grade level teams, right? So the leadership team has the systems level data, but they're supporting the work of those grade level professional community. And one of the things I just want to tell you about, remembering that they are using different forms of data. MTSSR leadership's more systems, classroom is more classroom, group, and individual student data. But it's more than, I just want to say first, you have these teams look at the data, but it is more than that. So first, let's watch this video about teams using the data. We're back to Kimberly Miles and her school in Oregon. One of the really neat things that she does, she has grade level teams meet at the same time, which I know is difficult for scheduling. So she might have grades K and 2, grades K1 and 2, and then grades 3 and 4 sort of clustered together. They meet simultaneously in the library. So you can see, for example, in this, she might have a team close to the door there at that table simultaneously, and other teams meeting at a different table in the library. By having them all occur simultaneously in the library, it allows her as a leader to move from team to team and check in. It also allows her to set some structure around these teams. So for example, you'll see the first part, teams talk about the data and what they will want to use with the data, how they want to apply that database decision making. The second part is what I'll add to this conversation, but watch a little bit. This is semi-simulated, but I want you to see how she interacts with these PLC teams. We're now talking about leadership support of grade level teams.
one thing I heard was progress monitoring, so that's really terrific that we're continuing to monitor their progress. My question to you was, what couple of students are you really prioritizing? And tell me more a little bit about those students, and what do they need more of?
I've got a group of about 6 kids that are all right around strategic scores, and I know they're so close, and so I just want to work with them a little bit more on their oral reading fluency and just more fluency practice.
Okay.
So I've been pulling them for a few days a week.
I know a lot of them are focus groups, with both of them working on doing like fluency passages, cold reads and hot reads, so they get a chance to practice it and rehearse it, and that's been really exciting to see their growth. They get to see their own growth too. They graph it themselves.
Great.
It's been really fun for them to see their growth.
They get so excited about their hot reads.
They do, yeah.
So a really, really short little excerpt, but part of it is getting in there to talk about the data. And one of the things I wanted you just to see is her setup. Her setup is different. I know we tend to have like the grade level teams go to a classroom, or, you know, the lead teacher's kindergarten classroom, and they meet there during their planning time and other things. And those structures certainly work. I just wanted to share the idea for leaders about housing it in, you know, cafeteria, library, a larger space, having teams meet. So there's overall cohesiveness, but at the same time, the teams are focusing on data. So as I said, there are two pieces to this. The one is what you just saw in the video clip, which is the data piece. But the second is, how are we going to use that and connect it to instruction in the classroom? One of the tools that does this really well is a professional learning community guide that was developed from the Institute of Education Sciences. The link is here. It aligns with a practice guide focused on foundational skills in reading. So if your building is trying to find the anchor for content for PLCs, this is an option. If you're focusing on explicit instruction, I highly suggest Anita Archer's book and videos that will anchor, could anchor professional learning communities. This is a great anchor. Essentially, what I want my meetings to do is look at how things are going, right? Define session goals and explore some new practices. We want PLCs not just to be about data, but what are the practices we've got to implement to support those data? That means, what are the instructional practices that teachers need to review, consider, and practice with each other during that PLC context, right? Step 4, experiment with newly learned strategies. Let me like mock teach to my other team members in 2nd grade, and just let me play around with it. Does the language feel clunky as I'm practicing my instruction? And then I reflect and plan. So optimally, PLCs need to link the two. And I think we tend to do data and database decision making and then determine instructional strategies to implement. But what we want to do is use those PLCs as a collaborative learning venue for practicing new instruction evidence-based practices, so we inch closer to fidelity of implementation. So like I did with the your MTSS-R leadership team, building leadership team, I have some examples, an example here of the kind of materials that you want to bring to a PLC. It's your data, yes, right? Your student data and your implementation data, also instructional plans of what you want to implement. Here's a sample agenda item. And then finally, a worksheet to think about how you might adjust instruction to better meet the needs of students, again, data-based, and that's in your resource packet. So we know having tools in place to guide the leadership team conversation, providing a structure to it is helpful for systems implementation. And so PLC should have a variety of these things going on. We should have the meeting, which is central and pictured in the first picture in the middle and at the bottom right hand side of the screen. We should also have the practice teaching piece with our team. No pressure, right? It's to allow us to practice instruction, work this out. In the case of the upper right, we could get fancy and do something where we are recording ourselves, right, with the technology and reflecting on that instruction, peer-to-peer observations of instruction. So it's taking that little bit added piece to your PLCs there. And that's what I wanted to share. So I'm now at my final item on your checklist. I want to present this as the conclusion, because we're talking about a continuous improvement process and tools to support MTSSR implementation. One of the drivers of sustainability is your professional learning. And so I want to end here. I want you to listen to Kimberly Miles again as she shares a little bit about the importance of professional learning within the multi-tiered systems of support. I shared with you, we're looking at a variety of different ways to impact classroom instruction, school-based workshops, knowledge building. It gets the word out, it gets us on the same page. Then we dig deeper and we look at those classroom practices and implementation. And then further deeper, we're looking at some instructional coaching. And this aligned with PLCs, optimize the PLC context for some of this. But I think Kimberly Miles will take us from beginning to end so you can hear the big picture. I want you to listen to her, and then I'm going to set you up with a little bit of a web quest to look at resources, and then I'll sum up our session. So let me, again, take some time to toggle to my video, get that queued up, and let you hear what Kimberly Miles says about professional learning. So just a minute here. Here we go.
So I think reading instruction, we really need to talk about what does the professional development look like. So we started there. So after we built our positive school culture and continued, that's a never-ending journey, we really dived into professional development, and we did it not only in just one segment, but ongoing. So what that means is we had an initial trainings on the early development of stages of reading for children, and what does that look like for instruction? What do I need to do differently or more of in order to facilitate the change that needs to occur? And then teachers, during these collaboration sessions, the professional development, teachers got to learn alongside each other on what that looks like, and building that sense of community and trust took a long time for them to develop a sense of ownership of this work, but they did it collaboratively and together. And so by purposefully creating that culture shift of moving out of isolation into a collaborative environment, we were able to change the trajectory or outcomes for students.
Yeah, so back to this,
I think reading instruction.
Sorry. So back to this idea, where does change for sustainability start? That's really key. And the change for sustainability starts with that professional learning and the collaboration. So she really brings us full circle, right? So and it's why professional development and coaching is one of the 5 elements of an MTSSR system. But where does it start? It starts with that professional learning. So I like that she has said that, and it absolutely brings us full circle. So let me set you up for a couple quick things to do here at the end of our session. I want you to know about some resources you can take away today. One is to know about the National Center on Improving Literacy and that website, improvingliteracy.org. Please check that out and just poke around and see what's there. There are things you can take from ENSEL and incorporate into your professional learning, your professional development. So there's ready to go materials. Also look, if you are interested in the parent and family work, look there. There's lots there. Also, for my leaders here, there is a Lead for Literacy website. Lead for Literacy is an other national center. It's aligned with the work from the National Center on Improving Literacy, but it is specifically for school leaders. So leaders, yes, my principals and assistant principals, but also my leadership team members. So this is another resource that takes the content we've been talking about, but it looks at it from a leadership lens. There's some really interesting things on the Lead for Literacy website, including some quick pick type videos that you can take and embed in professional development for those participating in your MTSSR system. So there are things for leaders to use here. Leadforliteracy.org. I love you to look at these 2 websites just for 2-3 minutes. It's a web quest. Just take a minute, go check one or both out, and when I come back to our group to finalize our session, I'd love you just to put in the chat anything that you think sort of strikes resonance. What resonance? What did you find that was interesting on these sites? And just share with a group on chat. A couple minutes for that. And while you do that, I'm going to take some time to find that district checklist. I'm going to see if I can do it during these quick couple of minutes while you check out those websites. So let's pause here. I'll tell you, I have not been successful at finding that district checklist readily, but I'll tell you where I'm heading to look for it so you can take next steps. So to all of you, let me get everybody here. I'm posting. This work emerged out of Oregon Reading First, and I'm putting a link in the chat for some tools related to Oregon Reading First. They have a lot of implementation tools there, including a district one. It's not the checklist I'm thinking of. What I want you to look for is the Oregon Reading Plan, not Oregon Reading Plan, state level reading plan. There's definitely a district checklist in the Oregon's reading plan. And so that those where I direct you. But yes, ENSLs will be coming soon. We have a draft. So we're just in the process of polishing that and getting it ready for the website. So hopefully that will help with that district level. So let me finish up and conclude. So back over to my PowerPoint. I want to talk to you about the resources that we're continuing to look at, including those 2 websites to know about. You have a variety of tools. Please do note that the infographics I shared in the session today can be taken and used and incorporated into your work. They've come from ENSL, and you'll continue to see some of these appear as we grow our work at ENSL. In conclusion, the ingredients for a successful MTSSR system implementation are the 5 here: core reading and intervention, data use, professional development and coaching, your leadership team, and work with parents and families. We use this continuous improvement process to set the context, and here are your tools. A checklist, right, to guide your evaluation. We had used a component of that checklist today for your leadership team reflection. I've shared some meeting agendas to steer your conversations, and an action plan that drives things through instruction and intervention. Coming up with an assessment plan is also key, and then there's some resources there to facilitate your professional learning communities. So, and it was a pleasure to walk through multi-tiered systems of support today from a systems perspective. Thank you so much for being here and for your interest in this content. I know MTSSR is complex and comprehensive, and I'm just hoping today it was a guide through some of that complexity. Anyway, I'm appreciative. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lena. We will be posting this on our Patent YouTube channel, so please do take a look. I'm going to quickly just share my screen. I did put the link in the chat for the form that you need to fill out. I do want you to know that we do have a MTSS Equity is MTSS conference coming up November 10th and 11th. In addition, we have a Helix conference coming up also in November for low incidence population.